Chapter 34:17. Everyone returned to their seats upon seeing that the main characters had arrived. Everyone understood that the real conference was about to begin. Yishuin glanced at the heavenly venerates sitting on their thrones, and his figure quickly became hazy. The entire conference was divided into 5 sections according to the different regions, and everyone's positions were different according to their proximity. Because there wasn't a leader in the Fortune God dynasty who could absolutely convince everyone, the 4 heavenly venerates were basically presiding over the conference. Even Spacetime Heavenly Venerate didn't have much say in this place where there were many veteran heavenly venerates. Strength was very important, but experience was also very important to a certain extent. Not to mention, Spacetime Heavenly Venerate might not have an advantage over the other heavenly venerates. Among the 4 heavenly venerates, Yishuin had seen the southern heavenly venerate and the eastern heavenly venerate. The northern heavenly venerate was a middle-aged man with a strong and slender build. His face was a bit cold, and he looked extremely callous. What surprised Yishuin was that the western heavenly venerate was actually a woman. She was dressed in a purple robe, had a slender figure, and had exquisite facial features. However, her eyes were like a pair of gemstones, and they were quite different from ordinary eyes. There was a warm smile on West Hinzuin's fair face. She was smiling like a girl next door, but no one dared to look down on her. Everyone knew very well that she was a very powerful person. The Western region was also directly facing an attack from a foreign region. If the Western Heavenly Venerate wasn't strong enough, how could she protect the safety of the Western region? Her strength was also among the strongest among the Heavenly Venerates. These 4 people were above many Heavenly Venerates. They were currently the 4 most powerful people in the Fortune God dynasty, and they were also the true rulers. I think everyone should have some idea of the purpose of gathering everyone here this time. At that moment, the Southern Heavenly Venerate paused and immediately said, "We have more or less heard about the general situation, but I want to know what exactly it is that requires us to gather here." At that moment, a Heavenly Venerate spoke and directly asked the question that everyone wanted to know. "Yeah, as far as I know, aren't there always many experts stationed on the battlefield? It's not time for them to be replaced yet, right?" Someone asked. Yishuin nodded slightly. During this time, he had inquired a lot about the Era battlefield from War Elder. The epic battlefield was a battlefield opened up by the Fortune Heavenly Monarch in the past. It was the first line of defense against the invasions of various ancient eras. The Fortune Divine Dynasty and many other worlds were safe because the ancient eras could not break through the epic battlefield's blockade and invade the Fortune world. However, this situation was not absolute. After the Fortune Heavenly Monarch disappeared, the ancient epics who got the news had planned a sneak attack and killed their way into the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Immediately, rivers of blood flowed. These ancient epics did not differentiate between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the outer heavenly realms. Wherever they went, not even a chicken or a dog was spared, because they wanted to occupy this era's world. Whether it was the Fortune Divine Dynasty or the outer heavenly realms, they were all obstacles to them. It was best to kill them all. In the end, they were unable to completely swallow the Fortune Divine Dynasty, because even the heavenly venerates of the outer heavenly realms had lent a helping hand, coupled with the suppression of the heavenly Tao. They had finally defeated the ancient epics. However, it was at that time that completely shocked the Fortune world. It let everyone know that even if there was still room for compromise between the Fortune Divine Dynasty and the outer heavenly beings, there was no room for compromise with the ancient epics, because this was a war of life and death. Some people with more foresight even thought about where they would go after this era was destroyed. At this time, the stronger the strength accumulated, the higher the probability of escaping the great apocalypse. Although the outer heavenly beings had the bloodline of the ancient epics, they did not think that they were one, especially the heavenly venerates. They had basically severed the great Tao of the past and chose to embrace and integrate into the current era. For them, those who had the same bloodline were also enemies who would face each other in life and death. This was also why the Eastern Heavenly Venerate said that there was no need to worry about the outer heavenly beings causing trouble, unless they also wanted their lair to be seized. It was absolutely impossible. Even if some people had different ideas, on the whole, the Fortune world could be considered to be relatively united on this issue. After that, a rotation system was established in the epic battlefield. After a long period of time, the Empyreans would be rotated. Otherwise, no one would be willing to stay in the epic battlefield forever. There had to be a limit to how many Empyreans there would die for the Fortune realm. Now is not the time to change the defense. Could there be a crisis in one of the city's defensive lines? Someone asked. On the epic battlefield, the Fortune God dynasty relied on the 10 giant cities to form a line that sealed the entire epic battlefield, preventing the powerhouses of the ancient epics from breaking through. Even if some powerhouses managed to break through, they did not dare to cause trouble in the Fortune God dynasty. What a joke. There were still a large number of experts in the Fortune world. If the experts of the ancient epics dared to enter, they would be courting death. It's even worse than this. The Eastern Heavenly Venerate stood up and glanced at everyone. Moon City has fallen. None of the Heavenly Venerates inside escaped. The Eastern Heavenly Venerate's words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everyone's expressions turned solemn. Everyone understood what the Eastern Heavenly Venerate meant. The balance of power between the Fortune God dynasty and the ancient epics on the epic battlefield was built on the foundation of the 10 giant cities. These 10 giant cities were personally arranged by the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch in the past. The 10 cities were named after heaven, earth, mystery, yellow, cosmos, desolate, sun, and moon. They were also the focus of supporting the entire defensive line. Behind each giant city was the existence that supported a large defensive line. Now that they had fallen, it meant that a huge gap had appeared in the defensive line of the epic battlefield. The ancient epics might even seize this opportunity to sweep through the entire defensive line in one fell swoop. Once the entire defensive line collapsed, the consequences would be unimaginable. The entire Fortune world would be affected, and the fluctuations would be even greater than the one in the past. Thinking of this, everyone was in an uproar. The situation was indeed very bad. It was no wonder that the rulers of the Fortune God dynasty had summoned them. Because of the fall of Luna City, we also received a request for reinforcements from the battlefield of the era. After a preliminary discussion, we formulated a plan to recover Luna City. That is one of the core points of our entire line of defense. We absolutely cannot lose it. Once we lose it, our line of defense will be torn apart by the enemy. We absolutely cannot bear the consequences. Venerate North said. His voice was deep and extremely dignified. Everyone present was smart and could even be said to be the best among all living beings. They all understood very well that in a clash of forces of this level, conspiracies and tricks were not very useful. To put it bluntly, it was still a clash of comprehensive strength. According to the information we received, Moon City has now become the headquarters of the ancient epics. Their experts and armies have been continuously mobilized there. Moreover, they're still trying to repair the great array left behind by the Fortune God Heavenly Monarch in the past and turn Moon City into the strongest stronghold. At this time, the Western Heavenly Venerate finally spoke. The smile on her face had completely disappeared. Her voice was pleasant to the ears, like a silver bell, but her words were sonorous and powerful. Once they succeed, it will be very difficult for us to recover Moon City. Everyone can imagine how difficult it will be for us to recover it. Therefore, we must take advantage of the fact that they have not stabilized their footing to drive them out. To achieve this, it is not enough to rely on those people on the epic battlefield. Therefore, they have asked us for help. After our discussion, except for a portion of people who will stay behind, everyone else must gather the armies of your respective clans and sections. This matter is related to the Fortune God realm. No one is allowed to shirk this responsibility. Yishuan heard the Western Heavenly Venerate's words and understood in his heart that the Fortune God dynasty had trained its troops for 1,000 years to use them for this one moment. The Fortune God dynasty usually turn a blind eye to some of the petty tricks and endured it. However, if anyone dared to cause trouble on this issue, then there were only a few words to describe it. The whole world will punish them. Many heavenly venerates clearly understood this, so no one raised any objections on this issue. It was just that there were some disagreements on who should hold back and who should go. However, these disagreements were nothing at all. If it was during normal times, they could still push the blame to each other. However, this time's incident was a competition between the great heavenly venerates to compete for the position of middle heavenly venerate. In order to obtain an overwhelming advantage in this war and become a middle heavenly venerate without a doubt, the great heavenly venerates would bring their factions and subordinates with them. Even Spacetime Heavenly Venerate would bring a few of his allies to the epic battlefield. It wasn't just the East, South, West Great Heavenly Venerates. Spacetime Heavenly Venerate was also very ambitious for the position of Middle Heavenly Venerate. For Yishuan, he could use such an opportunity to clearly see the lineage of the various great Heavenly Venerables. Moreover, he could see who was closer to the Fortune God dynasty and who was more independent. Everything was clear at a glance. After this battle, he understood why Heavenly Tao was known as the #1 sect in the world. Even so, they were still suppressed by the Fortune God dynasty. Because in the Fortune God dynasty's territory, there were many powerful clans and sects that were closer to the Fortune God dynasty. This allowed the Fortune God dynasty's strength to reach a crushing level. It was clear at a glance. Chapter 34:18. From the division of the scene, it could be seen that the so-called good news that the Fortune God dynasty had lost control of the fortune world was just a presumptuous guess. As long as this batch of heavenly venerables were still alive, the Fortune God dynasty's control over this place would not weaken. However, Yishuan also discovered that the heavenly venerables who had been rescued previously were basically excluded from this operation. Apart from the high-sounding excuse that they had yet to recover their strength. The most important reason was that this operation was a dialogue between several middle heavenly venerables who wanted to become heavenly venerables. No one wanted anyone else to join in and claim the credit, so the heavenly venerables were excluded. The heavenly venerables couldn't object even if they wanted to, because this was the reality. What was the use of going if they hadn't recovered their strength? The situation at the epic battlefield wasn't so bad that they needed to go together. Moreover, the Fortune God dynasty needed to have someone stationed there. Otherwise, no one knew what those people from the outer realms would do. It was not necessary for them to help those ancient era's forces occupy the fortune world. Just expanding their territory was more than enough to make the Fortune God dynasty suffer. Therefore, although they could rest assured, they still had to be on guard. Moreover, they had been trapped for many years. Not only had their strength declined, but even the tribes and sects that they could rely on were not as glorious as when they had left. At this time, they could only lie dormant and wait for an opportunity to rise. In addition to these arrangements, every heavenly venerables who were going to the epic battlefield had to gather an army and go together. They couldn't just rely on heavenly venerables to attack cities and seize territory. Yishuan thought for a moment and agreed. The human race might not have enough strategy to attack the outside world. However, it was already considered to be impregnable in terms of defense. Moreover, the existence of Venerable Sword made it almost impossible for the outsiders to get their hands on them. At this time, it was time for the elite army to be transferred to the epic battlefield to temper themselves. As long as they were careful and didn't let the entire army be annihilated, not only would they not suffer a loss, but they would also become a whetstone to temper the army. The epic battlefield was the most horrifying battlefield so far, and it was many times more horrifying than the expedition against the outer realms. However, such a place was also the best place to hone oneself. After another intense discussion, it was finally decided that the army would set off 1 year later. The heavenly venerables would need time to return and mobilize the army. 1 year later, they would meet up at the Fortune Divine Capital and then teleport to the epic battlefield through the Fortune Divine Capital's teleportation array. Even for heavenly venerables, crossing the primal chaos was not an easy task, let alone the emperors, and the army. If they were not careful, they could be wiped out. At this time, Yishuan was distracted by listening to everyone's discussion. From time to time, he would raise his own questions. On the other hand, he was fixedly staring at the world tree fruit. Finally, the world tree fruit matured when he heard the Eastern Venerable announce the adjournment of the meeting. It's finally matured. Yishuan grinned. Not only had the world tree fruit matured, but it was also the right time for him to kill Lord Skyfire. Yishuan casually put the world tree fruit into his bag, and then left the Fortune Divine capital with the other heavenly venerables. Soon, they returned to Buzhou, Sacred Mountain. They immediately gathered the high-level emperors of the human race and announced the mobilization order from the Fortune Divine dynasty. They were still a little confused. Only the Fengyi clan, who had lived for a long time, had heard about the epic battlefield. There was a huge and terrifying battlefield in the distant heavens beyond the heavens. No one else had even heard of it. It had been a long time since the last change of guard had happened, so they didn't know much about the epic battlefield. Furthermore, the human race didn't have any heavenly venerates, so the epic battlefield was a huge secret to them. When they suddenly heard that the Fortune Divine dynasty actually had a battlefield with the ancient era, in addition to the battlefield with the outer domain, they found it a little unbelievable. This had already surpassed their understanding. This was especially the case regarding the great destruction of the heavens and earth. To them, this was something inconceivable. To them, the world was endless. Because of this, they were also immortal. Only now did they know that the so-called everlasting world had its end. It was impossible to exist forever, especially when they heard that in the great apocalypse, emperors would also fall in large numbers. Those below the emperor level would die, without a doubt, unless they could obtain the protection of a heavenly venerate. Only then would it be possible for them to survive the great apocalypse. Now that they thought about it, they also felt very lucky because there was already a heavenly master like Yi Shiwen guarding the human race. Therefore, they could obtain Yi Shiwen's protection. Even if the great apocalypse happened countless years later, they could still survive. They didn't have to worry about dying in the great apocalypse. Master, since the epic battlefield is so dangerous, won't we be in great danger if we go there? Bian Xiaoye asked. Now that he was the lord of the divine court, the way he considered many problems was different from ordinary people. This was also a huge crisis for the Fortune Divine realm. But what could the human race gain from it? There will definitely be danger. Although I don't know much about the situation of the epic battlefield, the ancient era must have dispatched a large army since the Moon City, which was originally indestructible, has fallen. However, in my opinion, this is also a whetstone to hone the human race. Yishuan stood with his hands behind his back and said confidently, if a race wants to become a pillar of existence, it is not enough to rely on taking advantage of others. It must also bear the responsibility that it should bear. Since the human race has become a great race in the Eastern domain, the battle to expel the ancient era is inevitable. According to Yishuan's plan, the human race shouldn't be just an ordinary race. Instead, it couldn't avoid the war if it wanted to become a super race like the pillars of the heavens and the 10,000 worlds. After all, no one could become the supreme expert of the world by taking advantage of others. This was true for personal cultivation, and it was also true for the development of the human race. When a myriad heavens and myriad worlds were about to fall into the hands of the Tian clan, the human clan stood up and formed an allied army with the other races, becoming the pillar of the allied army. After the war, the status of the human clan as a super powerful race was not obtained by charity, but by relying on their own blades and spears. In the Fortune world, the leadership of the Fortune Divine dynasty did not depend on anyone's charity, but under the leadership of the Fortune Heavenly Monarch, they fought their way to the top. If the human race of the Fortune Divine dynasty wanted to rise, it was not enough to rely on their own protection. Without solid achievements, who could convince the masses? Moreover, this is also a good opportunity to hone our race. So, after some consideration, I finally decided to transfer the most elite legions to participate in the battle. This time, There will be 3 Emperor Lords accompanying me as Legion commanders. First, the Moon Empress, the Human Emperor, and the Sky-Shaking Thunder Emperor. The 3 of you will follow me to the epic battlefield. The rest will stay here. Yi Shiwen quickly made a decision, and the others immediately agreed. This was the first time that the human race and the alliance with the human race as the core participated in the war on the epic battlefield. They did not have much experience. Yi Shiwen naturally had his own considerations. This was the battle in the name of the human race. In addition to him, the strongest expert of the human race, the human emperor, as the leader of the human race, naturally could not avoid participating in the war. Bian Xiaoya had just entered the Emperor Lord realm. Although she needed time to stabilize her realm, this was a rare opportunity for her to broaden her horizons and temper herself. Moreover, the Sky-Shaking Thunder Emperor would be brought along. His life was in Yi Shiwen's hands, so he was naturally loyal to Yi Shiwen. He could be included in the experts of the human race's core camp. This time, they also needed an Emperor Lord expert besides him to oversee the war. Bian Xiaoya had just entered the Emperor Lord realm. She was more than enough to lead the Legion, but it was still not enough to suppress the others. The human emperor was the representative of the human race. However, his strength was only at the peak of the 4th realm. He still needed a little more to enter the 5th realm. Yi Shiwen also brought him along in the hope that he could go further in the epic battlefield and enter the 5th realm. Both of them had low strength, so they needed a leader who could suppress them. Although the Sky-Shaking Thunder Emperor was still slightly insufficient, he had the cultivation of the 8th realm. He was only 1 step away from entering the 9th realm. He could barely take on this heavy responsibility. This was also to make the human race's camp not so ugly. It was really helpless. The human race's foundation was too weak. Otherwise, they could have sent 2 or 3 Emperor Lords of the 9th realm. However, this was enough. The most important thing was still his performance. As for the Sky-Shaking Thunder Emperor, the Human Emperor, and Bian Xiaoya, they were only secondary. Master, are we going as the main force this time? Bian Xiaoya asked. It can be considered as part of the main force. In addition to us, the experts from the other cities who were originally stationed in the epic battlefield will also send a large number of experts. The entire line of defense is related to the safety of the Fortune world. There can't be any mistakes. The key to the safety of the entire line of defense is the 10 divine cities. So we must take them back. Yi Shiwen nodded and said. Everyone nodded. They were all talented geniuses. They had a photographic memory. They were very familiar with the way of arranging troops. They were very strategic. Naturally, they knew what kind of danger it meant if there was a loophole in the line of defense. All right, all of you go and deploy the troops. I'm only responsible for deciding the candidates of the Emperor Lords. As for the others, you choose them yourselves. Be sure to choose the most elite troops. Yi Shiwen said. He had never intervened in the matters of the lower ranks. Yes. Suddenly, the entire Buzhou mountain was shrouded in a terrifying coercion. Everyone was horrified as they explored their divine senses. Chapter 34:19. Yi Shiwen suddenly opened his eyes. He was too familiar with this coercion. It was none other than the heavenly Fire Divine Lord. He stood up suddenly because he thought of the worst situation. Could it be that Divine Lord Sky Fire had already broken through his cultivation? If that was the case, then it was really the worst news he had ever heard, because he planned to wait for Yi Shiwen to be ready and take action first. However, he didn't get this opportunity. A celestial master is attacking. Almost instantly, all the emperors gathered in the divine court reacted at once. It was impossible to have such a terrifying coercion except for a celestial master. That was because they had once felt this terrifying coercion from Yi Shiwen's body. It was the same coercion that could crush them to the point where they couldn't even fight back. Few emperors could break free from such coercion alone, let alone fight against a celestial master. It would be useless even if all the emperors in the divine court swarmed up. Not everyone was like Yi Shiwen. It was simply a miracle to be able to kill a celestial master in the emperor realm. The reason why it was a miracle was that it didn't have the characteristics that could be replicated. However, Yishuan soon felt that there wasn't any overwhelming sense of oppression coming from him. Since he wants to court death, then I will let him die without a burial place, said Yishuan. Originally, I wanted to find a reason to kill him. Now that he dares to attack us, then I don't need to find any excuse. He is dead. Everyone looked at Yishuan. It seemed that this person came for Yishuan. They had never heard Yishuan mention that he had actually offended such a terrifying celestial master. Yishuan just smiled faintly and didn't explain anything. At that time, he was just an emperor. If they knew that he had offended a celestial master, then it would undoubtedly bring unnecessary pressure to the human clan. Moreover, there is nothing to prepare for offending a celestial master, because any preparation was useless. In front of an Empyrean's preparations were meaningless. Everyone extended their divine senses out and instantly saw an incomparably gigantic palm pressing down. In an instant, everyone felt as though the entire horizon was about to explode as countless cracks appeared. With the gigantic palm as the center, the space within a radius of 10,000 li completely collapsed. An even more terrifying scene occurred. Not only did the space collapse, even the laws were manifested. After that, they were broken one by one in front of everyone. This horrifying scene caused everyone to feel their scalps going numb. Suddenly, a five-colored radiance rose from Yishuan's body and protected the entire Mount Buzhou within it. Wherever that gigantic hand passed by, it was invincible. However, when it fell into the multicolored light, it actually started to crumble inch by inch, unable to advance at all. The entire confrontation was silent. No one could hear a single sound. However, the terrifying collision fell into everyone's ears. It was extremely terrifying. The power of every inch could kill an emperor. Even if they were powerful, they were nothing in the face of such power. When the collision came to an end, powerful energy surged out. Everyone heard a huge roar, as if thousands of thunderbolts had exploded at the same time. Many creatures on Buzhou Mountain trembled in the face of this collision. They knelt on the ground and didn't dare to move. When they were blinded again, Yishuan had already disappeared and appeared on Buzhou's sacred mountain. Yishuan's green robe was fluttering in the wind. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, emitting a majestic aura. It's revered martial artist. It's revered martial artist. Many of the people who had been frightened earlier were now overjoyed. To their knowledge, the human martial saint was invincible. Ever since he had appeared, he had never been defeated. His strength was unfathomable. No matter what difficulties the human race faced, as long as he made a move, he would be able to solve them easily. It was precisely because of Yishuan's repeated victories that everyone's trust in him continued to increase. The advantage was that as long as Yishuan's invincible legend was not exposed, the morale of the human race would continue to rise. Even if Yishuan gave the order to fight against the Fortune God dynasty, they would still dare to rush forward with enthusiasm. However, the disadvantage was that if Yishuan was defeated, then the morale of the human race would also plummet. They would not be as cohesive as an ordinary large clan. It could be said to be a mixed bag. Yishuan just stood there and stopped all the raging tides. This raging tide had no way to spread out and destroy Buzhou Mountain. It directly disappeared without a trace, demonstrating his amazing strength as a celestial master. This raging tide that even an emperor couldn't deal with was easily annihilated by Yishuan with a wave of his hand. Come out, divine revered Skyfire. I know you are here. What's the point of continuing to hide? Yishuan said faintly. His pair of eyes were like steel blades that directly scraped into the space. Humph. A cold and berserk voice resounded, and a fiery red figure came out of the void. It was none other than divine God Skyfire. His imposing aura wasn't inferior to Yishuan's. In fact, his aura was even more berserk than Yishuan's. From afar, it gave people the illusion of facing a great sun. However, it was not like the great sun's celestial master, who cultivated the laws related to the sun. Instead, it was a feeling of a flame burning to the extreme and turning into a sun. Many Emperor Lords on Buzhou Mountain showed a bit of worry on their faces because they knew more than ordinary people. Divine Revered Skyfire was a veteran celestial master who had been a celestial master for many years. In comparison, Yi Shiwen was just a newcomer who had just become a celestial master. There was no comparison between the two at all. How could they be compared? It was true that Yi Shiwen was invincible among the emperors, and it was almost difficult for him to meet a worthy opponent. However, he was a newcomer among the celestial masters. Could he really deal with such a formidable veteran celestial master? It was not that they lacked confidence in Yi Shiwen, but the more they understood, the more they felt that these veteran celestial masters were terrifying. And their understanding of Yi Shiwen was still at the level of a beginner celestial master. It was already very good that he could protect himself. Yi Shiwen fixed his gaze on Divine Revered Skyfire. With a somewhat sneer on his face, he said, "Aren't you in closed-door training? You actually came out before breaking through the heavenly gate." In the face of Yi Shiwen's sneer, Divine Revered Skyfire had a somewhat tyrannical smile on his face. He said, "I've changed my mind. From the moment my avatar saw you, I changed my mind. Your threat is too great. It's only 10,000 years. Who do you think you are? My avatar can crush you. But now, you can actually achieve the Celestial Master Realm fruit. It's simply a miracle." Divine Revered Skyfire did not belittle Yi Shiwen's achievements because for him, it was not necessary at all. On the contrary, the more he confirmed Yi Shiwen's achievements in the past 10,000 years, the more difficult it was to suppress the murderous intent in his heart. The feedback from his avatar actually made him feel a great sense of threat. This sense of threat was generated out of thin air, but he trusted this intuition more. Moreover, with Yi Shiwen's growth speed, and now that he had already entered the Celestial Master Realm, this sense of threat was not groundless. There was real evidence. His intuition told him that if he let Yi Shiwen go this time, he would definitely regret it in the future. Miracle, haha. What I like the most is to kill these so-called miracles. Divine Revered Skyfire laughed loudly. His tone was full of coldness and conceit. "You're afraid," Yi Shiwen said lightly. "That's right. I'm afraid. If an unstable factor like you continues, the consequences will be unimaginable." Divine Revered Skyfire did not deny it. Having cultivated to this stage, he was already direct to his heart. He was not willing to deceive himself. Moreover, with Yi Shiwen's current status, whether he admitted it or not, it was enough for him to be on an equal footing with him. Therefore, he did not feel that this was very embarrassing. As long as he could kill Yi Shiwen, everything else was secondary. It's a pity that you actually came so early. Otherwise, it would be me killing the Divine Flame cult now," said Yi Shiwen. He did not show any weakness. Divine Revered Skyfire's words were extremely conceited, but he was not someone who would willingly submit to others. "As expected, you do have such intentions. That is why I can vaguely sense a great threat. However, it doesn't matter. Although it will take some effort to kill you, I will have nothing to worry about after I kill you. Breaking through the heavenly gate is almost 100% matter." Hierarch Skyfire's expression became increasingly cold as he spoke. Yi Shiwen had his own plans. Naturally, Hierarch Skyfire also had his own plans. Over time, Yi Shiwen, who had been constantly breaking through, had actually become an inner demon in his heart. Now, as long as he dealt with Yi Shiwen, it would be a piece of cake for him to break through to the fourth realm again. If he did not kill Yi Shiwen, he did not know how long it would take for him to break through the heavenly pass. "You want to kill me? That's a good idea. However, it's a pity that you won't have such a chance." Yi Shiwen laughed coldly. "If you break through the heavenly pass, you might still have a small chance. However, today will definitely be the day of your death." Good. You are still so sharp-tongued. However, your sharp tongue is useless now. It will only delay your death," said Divine Revered Skyfire coldly. "This is not the place to fight. Come with me." After Yi Shiwen finished speaking, he took a step forward and entered the boundless starry sky. He was not worried that divine revered Skyfire would take the opportunity to attack Mount Bujo. A celestial master would not be so despicable. Sure enough, divine revered Skyfire turned into a ball of flame and chased after him. Chapter 34:20. The two of them entered the starry sky one after the other. Yishuan naturally didn't want Mount Bujo to be reduced to ashes. Hierarch Skyfire also had his concerns. Fighting between heavenly venerables was already a huge taboo, let alone fighting within the Fortune God dynasty. Although the space of the Fortune God realm was far sturdier than other worlds, and emperors wouldn't cause too much damage, it would recover quickly. But heavenly venerables were different. When heavenly venerables went all out, there was a high possibility that they would create a permanent crack, turning a fertile land into a barren desert. Not only the Fortune God dynasty couldn't tolerate this, but the other heavenly venerables also couldn't tolerate it. The influence of the terrain had a long history. Even if a prefecture was destroyed, it would affect the terrain of several surrounding prefectures, severing the earth veins and causing irreversible consequences. Therefore, the heavenly venerables had a tacit understanding not to fight within the Fortune God dynasty. Even if there was a life-and-death grudge, it would have to be resolved in the starry sky or even in the primal chaos. They weren't allowed to mess around in the Fortune God dynasty. I thought you were just an ant in the past, but now you've grown so much. Let me end my mistake now. I'm not Emperor Primordial Chaos. Hierarch Skyfire sneered. In an instant, the entire galaxy froze and stopped operating. The laws of heaven and earth were frozen, imprisoned by him. Hierarch Skyfire displayed his terrifying strength as soon as he appeared. Because Yishuan was also a heavenly venerate, he naturally couldn't deal with him the same way he dealt with ordinary emperors. This terrifying divine power spread out, becoming wider and wider, as if forming a domain. In an instant, it enveloped Yishuan. In an instant, Yishuan felt the suppression of this incomparably powerful force, making his entire body unable to move. All the laws around him changed, becoming advantageous to Hierarch Skyfire. This was the means of a heavenly venerate. However, he wasn't in a hurry. If he was still in the Emperor realm, he would have no choice but to hurriedly use his ultimate move to resist. But now, his body just shook slightly, and an unknown ripple spread out. The pressure brought by the change in laws instantly disappeared without a trace. His eyes shone with a terrifying light. Wherever his gaze landed, the formless pressure would collapse wherever it went. His whole body's magic power was burning with a terrifying radiance. A strange phenomenon appeared on his body. He was like a giant. He was holding the sun, moon, and galaxy in one hand and the river of time in the other. He had complete control over the power of time and space in his hand. He fused them into one and suddenly rushed towards divine Lord Skyfire. With his terrifying power, it turned into a terrifying attack that headed straight for Hierarch Skyfire's face. It seemed as if it wanted to kill him in one fell swoop. In the face of Yishuan's earth-shattering attack, Skyfire Divine Venerable was not in a hurry. He waved his hand, and boundless flame laws splashed out. They combined directly, bringing with them a terrifying power to meet Yishuan's attack. Boom! The violent collision caused the entire starry sky to tremble. Whether it was time or space, everyone could feel the vibration. Many laws were shaken out. Many people could clearly see that this galaxy was completely different from what they had seen all year round. In other words, the protective layer had been torn off, and his original appearance had been restored. That was the truth of the world formed by endless laws. It was just that everyone couldn't see in the past. As the saying goes, seeing a mountain is not a mountain. They were all covered by thin film. Now that the true appearance of the world had been revealed, they felt unfamiliar. This was something that was even more laughable. After the collision, Skyfire Divine Venerable was immediately sent flying. He spat out mouthfuls of blood. He had suffered a huge loss in the previous exchange. However, before he could react, Yishuan had already pounced on him again. A terrifying attack swept out like a raging tide, instantly drowning Skyfire, divine, venerable. Yishuan was well aware of the principle of if you don't kill a snake, you'll be harmed instead. Therefore, he used a ruthless and deadly move from the get-go. He displayed the terrifying strength of a third realm expert right from the start. For a moment, the entire galaxy glittered under his attack. The rays of light that erupted seemed as if another sun had appeared in the world. It was extremely terrifying. Everyone could still feel this terrifying collision even though they were in the distant Fortune world. Finally, this series of collisions and battles alarmed the heavenly venerables in the Fortune God dynasty. They were all too familiar with the changes in the record of heaven and earth. When they saw this scene, they couldn't help but probe with their divine senses. Is there another battle between heavenly venerables? Recently, there have been too many battles of this level. There were also veteran heavenly venerables who frowned. Although the number of heavenly venerables wasn't so low that it could be counted on one's fingers, it was still pitifully few compared to the huge number of living beings. A battle of this level might not happen even once in countless years. If it happened too often, the mystery of heavenly venerables would disappear without a trace. This wasn't a good thing for them. Many people could clearly see that one of them was the recently risen heavenly venerable Martial Venerable Yishuan, while the other was the veteran heavenly venerable Skyfire, divine venerable. Originally, it seemed unlikely that the two of them would meet. However, they had actually started fighting. Moreover, from the way Yishuan attacked, it was clear that he was going for the kill. What kind of grudge did the two of them have that couldn't be resolved? In particular, one was in the eastern region, while the other was in the southern region. In theory, it should be very difficult for them to meet. However, more people were astonished by Yishuan's strength. A newly ascended celestial master was suppressing a veteran celestial master. This situation seemed like a miracle no matter how one looked at it. In fact, it was impossible for such a thing to happen. However, Yishuan had actually achieved such an impossible miracle. He has actually entered the third realm. In the divine capital of Fortune, Eastern Venerable stood with his hands behind his back. He gazed into the distance and took in the panoramic view of the battle that had taken place in the universe. Although he had already estimated Yishuan's strength, he had not expected that Yishuan had actually entered the third realm. The third realm was originally nothing much. However, if one took into account the time that Yishuan had taken to attain Tao, it would be extremely terrifying. In a mere 10,000 years, he had rushed all the way from the first realm to the third realm. This speed was not just like riding a rocket. It was simply like riding a spaceship at the speed of light. It was far beyond everyone's imagination. If Yishuan had entered the third realm, then many plans could be changed because Yishuan would become an even stronger ally and partner. However, looking at this place, it is actually in the eastern region. It seems that Hierarch Skyfire was the one who attacked Yishuan first. This saves a lot of trouble. Southern Venerable has also explained this matter. However, with just this strength, he might be able to catch Hierarch Skyfire off guard. However, it is impossible to kill him. Let me take a good look at how many trump cards you have. Eastern Venerable muttered to himself. He recalled Yishuan's expression when he had asked him how much he would have to pay to kill Hierarch Skyfire. Yishuan's expression had been persistent and serious. He was definitely not crazy. In that case, he must have had his own confidence. Hence, he also wanted to see what Yishuan's true trump cards were. Hierarch Skyfire was punched in the chest by Yishuan again. Dense cracks appeared on his chest. Although the punch did not penetrate his chest, this kind of injury was extremely terrifying for a heavenly venerable. Golden blood flowed out of the wound continuously. In addition to the wounds on other parts of his body, Hierarch Skyfire looked like a golden blood man cast in gold from afar. Hierarch Skyfire forcibly resisted Yishuan's attack. However, he also relied on the terrifying impact of this attack to counterattack and escape from Yishuan's attack range. He finally had a chance to catch his breath. Why? Hierarch Skyfire seemed to be unable to suppress the strength of Yishuan's attack on his body. He spat out another mouthful of blood essence. This mouthful of blood essence was like a sharp arrow. It shot out at the speed of light and directly smashed a star into pieces. The star bore the terrifying force that Yi Shiwen had blasted into Hierarch Sky Fire's body. Hierarch Sky Fire took the opportunity to spit out blood. Although some of his vitality was injured, his complexion was obviously much better. He was not like before where he could not even suppress the internal breath in his body. You have actually entered the third realm. Hierarch Sky Fire's eyes flashed with extreme disbelief. He had been in closed-door cultivation for a long time, but it did not mean that he was ignorant. He was still very clear about the approximate time when Yi Shiwen had achieved Tao. When Yi Shiwen had crossed the tribulation, it had caused an uproar. Who in the entire Fortune God dynasty did not know about it? It was also because he had such accurate information that he felt unscrupulous. So what if Yi Shiwen had entered the heavenly venerable realm? It would be good if he could consolidate his realm within 10,000 years. At best, he would be a first realm heavenly venerable. No matter how many fortuitous encounters he had, he would at most enter the second realm. That would already be very terrifying. And with his strength, even if he had not completed the breakthrough, it was almost impossible to meet a worthy opponent in the third realm. This was not arrogance. It was confidence that was deduced from a lot of information. He indeed had the strength to crush Yi Shiwen. There was no doubt about this. However, he was caught unprepared as soon as he came up and was directly beaten up. The battle that he had expected to crush Yi Shiwen did not happen at all. On the contrary, he was beaten up by Yi Shiwen. If he had not forcefully resisted Yi Shiwen's attack and used it to escape from Yi Shiwen's attack range, it was very likely that he would be seriously injured by Yi Shiwen if this continued. All of this told him how ridiculous his initial thoughts were. Chapter 34:21. All of this was like a slap to his face, making him make a fool of himself. At first, he thought that no matter how Yi Shiwen resisted, it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to be his opponent. All he had to do was suppress Yi Shiwen. Now, he had yet to suppress Yi Shiwen, but he was suppressed by Yi Shiwen instead. How could he endure this? That's right. If I didn't have this ability, how would I dare to go up the mountain of swords? Yi Shiwen said faintly. He tried his best to hide it before, but now that it was exposed, there was nothing to hide. It's a pity that you came out too early. You're right about one thing. After a while, I will come to kill you. Yi Shiwen stood with his hands behind his back, his expression indifferent. His words also made everyone understand that the grudges between the two sides were not just a little. If Yi Shiwen didn't come to kill Hierarch Skyfire, then Hierarch Skyfire would come to kill Yi Shiwen. There was no room for reconciliation. Between the two of them, life and death would probably be decided. No matter who won, it would probably cause a huge earthquake. Yi Shiwen had the Eastern Heavenly Lord behind him, and Hierarch Skyfire was also in the Southern Heavenly Lord's camp. The fight between the two could almost be seen as the first collision between the two camps. Although it started with the personal grudges between the two sides, in a sense, it was also the first confrontation between the two big shots. Hierarch Skyfire's face was filled with dissatisfaction. In the past, Yi Shiwen was no different from an ant in his eyes. At most, he was a slightly bigger ant. Even if Yi Shiwen had killed a new heavenly lord like the sky-devouring Demon King, he was not worthy to be his opponent. At that time, he could really crush Yi Shiwen with one finger. But now, it had only been more than 10,000 years. Yi Shiwen actually beat him up in such a domineering manner, making him lose face in front of everyone. Unfortunately, your current strength has not reached its peak, and this is your biggest weakness. Hierarch Skyfire quickly suppressed the anger in his heart. An ordinary third realm is not my opponent at all. This was the biggest conceit in his heart. He was not Emperor Primordial Chaos, so the problem of insufficient chi and blood was nothing to him. It could not trap him. He hadn't used his full strength just now, and he was still measuring Yi Shiwen as an ordinary heavenly master who had just entered the first realm. But now he naturally wouldn't do that at all. Hierarch Skyfire chanted a series of ancient scriptures in a low voice. In an instant, There was a buzzing sound, and the entire universe was ignited. Time, space, everything was burned by the flames, turning into solid crystals that materialized. Endless flames poured down like the Milky Way from the nine heavens, forming a waterfall. Hierarch Skyfire stood within, surrounded by endless flames. At some unknown time, a dark red spear had appeared in his hand. It was unknown when the spear tip had been stained with the blood of an Empyrean, but it dripped down drop by drop. Looking at it from afar, it was a frightening sight. This was an extremely shocking scene. Many people saw this scene, and no matter how many years passed, they would never forget it. It was extremely terrifying, and it was imprinted in their hearts. All of the natural laws between heaven and earth were changed into the natural laws of flames, becoming his flame divine country. How terrifying! Hierarch Skyfire is really going to attack. He's not like before, where he obviously underestimated an Empyrean. The two great Empyreans have been separated by tens of thousands of years, but now a great battle is going to break out here. Such a battle is rare in this lifetime. Many people exclaimed, sighing at the strength and terror of Hierarch Skyfire. Both sides were unbelievably strong, especially Yishiwen. Even though he had just entered the third realm, in the fortune realm that had experienced the heavenly gate tribulation, he was still considered a top Empyrean. A battle of this level was really rare to see. Whoosh! Suddenly, divinity Tianhua opened his mouth and spouted out an immeasurable amount of golden light. It transformed into a swift and fierce attack and swept in all directions. It was as bright as lightning. It streaked across the sky and arrived in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. The terrifying attack arrived in front of Yi Shiwen in an instant. Everyone held their breath, not daring to breathe loudly. They looked at Yi Shiwen nervously. At this time, Yi Shiwen finally made his move. He shouted kill. Facing Hierarch Skyfire's attack, he was not to be outdone. He almost transformed his body into Tao, and his aura swallowed the mountains and rivers. His black hair danced in the sky, and every strand of his hair directly drew traces of the great Tao. He looked even more mysterious and unpredictable. Every move he made had its own natural laws. It merged with the heavenly Tao, forming a terrifying light screen that blocked Hierarch Skyfire's attack. Bang! Yishiwen immediately felt the huge force coming from his arm tremble. It actually paralyzed him for a moment. This was not because Yi Shiwen's physical body was weak, but because Hierarch Skyfire's cultivation was too profound. It was so profound that it could crush all his advantages. Your skills have actually reached such a profound level. Hierarch Skyfire's eyes widened. He could also feel that the power that Yi Shiwen reflected back was very profound. I'm afraid that even an ordinary peak of the third realm can only do so much. Yi Shiwen's amazing strength shocked Hierarch Skyfire. This was because Yi Shiwen had clearly not entered the peak of the third realm, and he could not feel that smooth and seamless aura. However, Yi Shiwen, who had not entered the peak of the third realm, was actually able to erupt with combat power that was no less than that of a peak of the third realm. This was what he was most afraid of. This series of exchanges made him truly feel the threat that Yi Shiwen posed. It was not the kind of vague threat that he originally felt, but a real threat. Now, Yi Shiwen had actually entered the third realm. If this continued, when Yi Shiwen entered the peak of the third realm, it would be terrible. At that time, even if Hierarch Skyfire broke through the Heaven Gate and re-entered the fourth realm, it would be very difficult to kill Yi Shiwen. It's a pity that you don't have the chance to enter the peak of the third realm. Today, you must die here. Hierarch Skyfire roared out as he raised his arm. The dark red long spear in his hand pierced out. Almost instantly, it pierced through everything. In that instant, the Milky Way collapsed and time flowed backward. Wherever the spear light swept past, the heaven and earth trembled, and the sun and moon lost their light. When he became powerful, he was incomparably terrifying. The power of a veteran Empyrean was completely displayed. Even a casual sweep of his hand could destroy a planet. If he were to attack in the good fortune realm, the consequences would be unimaginable. Even the heavens and earth would be destroyed. However, Yishiwen did not show the slightest sign of weakness in the face of this spear. The myriad manifestations gloves had already appeared on his hands, and he slapped out with his palm. Fortune Universe Palm. Yishiwen's palm slapped down. Almost all the power of heaven and earth condensed in his palm. When it slapped down fiercely, it had unpredictable power. Pum, pum, pum. Everyone discovered that Divine Venerable Skyfire's performance was extremely powerful. His long spear had swept across and destroyed everything. However, Yishiwen was able to fight evenly with Divine Venerable Skyfire, using only his palms in combination with the mysteries of the Myriad Elephant's hand and the Fortune Universe Palm. He wasn't at a disadvantage. If Hierarch Skyfire was using his incomparably powerful skills to sweep through, then Yishiwen was using the power of heaven and earth to fight for him when he used the Fortune Universe Palm. Especially in the universe, the starlight in the sky flew over and then turned into countless rays of light. They directly entered Yishiwen's palm and then blasted out. It was as if he was standing in the center of the entire universe. The starlight in the sky was under his control, and it condensed into endless waves, completely resisting Hierarch Skyfire's attack. All of Hierarch Skyfire's attacks could be described as pure. With the law of fire as the foundation, he should be invincible, and no one should be able to resist him. However, Yishiwen was an exception. He was a heterogeneous person. All the Tao and all the power in heaven and earth seemed to be under his control. This was because the Tao that he cultivated was very heterogeneous. Because of this, any place could be considered as his home ground. He didn't have to worry about being in a completely disadvantageous state in any place. Even Yishiwen had a very deep understanding of the law of fire. It was extremely impressive. The battle between both sides had reached a white-hot stage. Yishiwen used all the Tao in combination with the Fortune Universe Palm to sweep out, while Hierarch Skyfire relied on his own profound skills to slowly gain the upper hand. At this time, the gap between the cultivation years of both sides had finally been thoroughly reflected. Dang, dang, dang. The collision between both sides created a burst of sparks and turned into a sea of fire that swept out. Both sides did their best. The Universe Creation Palm is indeed impressive. However, I want to see how many more times you can use it. Hierarch Skyfire attacked with all his might. He unleashed all the power in his body and slowly gained the upper hand. How could he not see that Yishiwen's martial power was far inferior to his own? Yishiwen wasn't inferior to an ordinary expert at the peak of the third realm. However, an ordinary expert at the peak of the third realm wouldn't have been able to escape from his hands. His cultivation level had fallen, but his perception of the realm was still there. Not to mention the advantage of his accumulated martial power. He should have been able to easily crush a junior like Yishiwen. However, it was resolved and resisted by Yishiwen's Fortune Universe Palm. This caused his advantage and skills to be unable to be released. However, there was nothing he could do because of the fame of the Fortune Universe Palm. How could he not know the martial arts that made Lord of Fortune famous in the past? Later on, its whereabouts were unknown. No one in the entire Fortune God dynasty learned it, and it was directly lost. He just didn't know where this revered marshal got it from. His luck was too good. However, in the face of my absolute strength, even the Fortune Universe Palm can't save your life. Hierarch Skyfire's spear pierced Yishiwen's palm, and Yishiwen was sent flying. Chapter 34:22. Yishiwen quickly stabilized his figure in midair. This spear attack had caused the blood in his entire body to surge. It was indeed as Hierarch Skyfire had said. He was only relying on the mysteriousness of a Universe Creation Palm to resist it. But even so, the gap brought about by the skill still caused the blood in his entire body to surge. Hierarch Skyfire was indeed terrifying. He was worthy of being a high-level expert. If he was facing an ordinary peak of the third realm, Yishuan would not be at a disadvantage without using the Universe Creation Palm. With the Universe Creation Palm, he would be able to gain the upper hand and even suppress the opponent. It would not be so strenuous for him to face an ordinary Fourth Realm expert. He was even more terrifying than an ordinary Fourth Realm expert. This was the terror of a veteran Heavenly Lord. Whether it was accumulation or realm comprehension, he was above Yishuan. Under normal circumstances, I would be defeated, as you said. But do you really think that I did not prepare anything? Yishuan smiled coldly. He flipped his palm, and a world tree fruit appeared in his hand. This world tree fruit was sparkling and translucent. It carried the brilliance of endless principles. Then he swallowed it all at once. Hierarch Skyfire also saw it, but he did not take it to heart. He just said coldly, "It's useless for you to eat now. Even if you make some progress in your skill in a short period of time, it will be useless. You will definitely die in this battle." He wanted to kill an Emperor Lord. Before he made his move, he had already prepared for it. It would not be easy to complete it, but his determination to kill Yishuan had become even firmer. If such a person was not dealt with as soon as possible, the consequences would be even more unimaginable. Yishuan smiled faintly. He only felt the majestic power immediately spreading into his limbs and bones. His martial power was steadily improving. Along with the improvement of his martial power, his comprehension of the Great Way was also increasing. Many law insights suddenly surged into his mind. This world tree fruit originally contained many law insights. In Yishuan's body, his mysterious space was operating rapidly, helping Yishuan to comprehend. Therefore, Yishuan could achieve an almost seamless connection. Wherever he absorbed, he would comprehend. At this time, he was like a volcano that was about to erupt. He was trying his best to suppress everything. However, once it erupted, the power would be unimaginable. Boom! Hierarch Skyfire made his move once again. He raised his aura once again and was about to completely merge with the world. The fire laws emitted from his body seemed to be able to split the heavens and earth apart. It was as if the sun and moon in the entire galaxy would be changed. In the distance, many people were trembling, especially the emperors who were watching this battle. Although they kept telling themselves that celestial venerables were just stronger cultivators, when they truly felt the terror of divine venerate sky fire, they could not help but tremble uncontrollably. That was the suppression of a completely different level of life. It's too terrifying. There's definitely a reason why Hierarch Skyfire could remain invincible for so many years. Many people felt their hair stand on end. Yishuan also shouted loudly. His heterogeneous great Tao was like an ocean that could accommodate everything. No matter what kind of attack fell into his ocean, it was useless. He stepped on a large array under his feet. Countless speed laws were engraved on it. These speed laws emerged one by one and manifested, turning into this large array. In an instant, Yishuan's speed was raised to the peak. He stepped on these great Tao traces under his feet and met it with a palm of his own. Boom! Both sides collided in an astonishing manner. The raging waves of divine power spread everywhere. Everywhere it passed, there was a huge collapse. The sky was torn apart, and it was like breaking dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. Fortunately, there were no living creatures in the depths of the galaxy. Otherwise, the power of these two people's attacks would be too astonishing. It was enough to completely destroy them. Worlds would be destroyed by the battle between these two people. At this moment, Hierarch Skyfire had fused with the heavenly Tao. It was as though his body had turned into a legendary furnace that wrapped the entire heaven and earth within it. It was as though he was trying to refine the entire heaven and earth. His surroundings were filled with terrifying, incomparably blazing divine flames that were burning furiously. Anything that came near would be refined. This divine furnace that manifested directly engulfed Yishuan. The dark red spear continued to attack, almost piercing the world and tearing it apart. It seemed that Yishuan was already in imminent danger. Hierarch Skyfire, who was going all out, was indeed terrifying to the extreme. Sure enough, after all, Wu Zun's time to achieve the great Tao is too short. In this aspect, he is completely at a disadvantage. Is the veteran Celestial Lord really so terrifying? Even Wu Zun, who is able to kill Celestial Lords in the Emperor era, can't resist. He will be engulfed soon. I can't sense Wu Zun's aura anymore. Everyone immediately started discussing. Looking at the scene, Hierarch Skyfire, whose aura had increased by another level, had completely gained the upper hand. He originally only had a slight upper hand, but now he was completely crushing Yishuan. Yishuan's defeat was already certain. But at this moment, the body of Hierarch Skyfire, who had already manifested a divine furnace, moved slightly. Then, his flame divine furnace that covered the sky suddenly shattered. Then, everyone only saw a fist instantly penetrate everything, blasting away the divine furnace that covered the sky. Then, they only saw Yishuan take a step forward. His body burst out with light that covered the sky, blazing like a blazing sun. He crossed the sky and directly counterattacked Hierarch Skyfire. He actually still has the ability to fight back. This shocked many people. In their opinion, Yishuan should not have the strength to fight back. After all, the power of Hierarch Skyfire was too overwhelming. It's the fruit that he ate just now. It really can greatly improve his power. Many people opened their eyes wide. They wanted to recall what Yishuan had swallowed earlier. It was undoubtedly a rare heavenly treasure that could make a heavenly master's martial power increase by leaps and bounds. They would naturally be able to greatly enhance their strength if they could obtain it by chance. And this was what they wanted the most. Yishuan was like a god bathed in flames. He was the only ruler walking between heaven and earth. Everyone was stunned by his performance. There was absolute silence. Whether it was a celestial lord or an emperor, they seemed to be frightened at this moment. Hierarch Skyfire retreated again and again. Yishuan's counterattack had directly broken his encirclement and made his encirclement disappear like a bubble. His face showed a somewhat dignified expression. Although he guessed that the fruit that Yishuan swallowed would inevitably increase his strength, in his opinion, it would only improve his strength in a short period of time. This kind of thing that could improve the strength of a celestial lord in a short period of time was rare, but it was not non-existent. However, Yishuan's strength improvement was slightly exaggerated. He actually broke his encirclement and encirclement in an instant. His momentum had increased by a notch, but he still could not suppress Yishuan. It could be seen that the fruit that Yishuan swallowed just now was useful. However, his face quickly regained its calmness. After all, relying on external forces could not last long. After breaking the encirclement and encirclement of Hierarch Skyfire that had transformed into a divine furnace, Yishuan did not stop at all. He was also not interested in finding out what Hierarch Skyfire was thinking. In an instant, he slammed his palm towards Hierarch Skyfire. Boom! An incomparably loud roar sounded. The palm directly landed on Hierarch Skyfire's body. Hierarch Skyfire's body suddenly erupted with endless blazing light, blocking Yishuan's palm. However, such a confrontation only lasted for a moment. In an instant, the light that erupted from Hierarch Skyfire's body could not stop Yishuan. He was directly slammed by Yishuan's palm. Bang! Hierarch Skyfire retreated continuously. His body could not help but shake. His blood was constantly surging. He almost spat out a mouthful of blood essence. How is this possible? A look of disbelief finally flashed across his face. This was because he could clearly feel that Yishuan's palm had clearly improved a bit. That was why he was caught off guard and was directly slapped. If it were not for his profound cultivation, he would have been exposed with just this palm and suffered a great loss. This was an improvement on the foundation that Yishuan had already improved. This was the reason why he was surprised. Could it be that the fruit's improvement had not reached its limit? However, without waiting for him to think too much, Yishuan's next wave of attack arrived in an instant and hit his body all at once. He quickly began to counterattack. He opened up all kinds of flame anomalies, disintegrating heaven and earth. He swept out the laws in the void to resist Yishuan. However, the more he resisted, the more shocked he became. Heavenly Master level experts had to fight hundreds or thousands of times in an instant. Because of this, he could clearly feel Yi Shiwen's growth. This kind of growth was very amazing because he could feel Yi Shiwen's growth every time they fought. After fighting a few times, he could feel that Yi Shiwen had a significant improvement. This was the most terrifying thing. Heavenly Masters were tyrannical. Their skills were like the boundless starry sky. It was also because of this that all cultivation was extremely difficult. Every step forward required a lot of resources and a lot of time. It was simply impossible for Yi Shiwen to have a big breakthrough in such a short period of time. If he had broken through to a new realm, then his strength would have increased by several times. It was completely different from the current situation. How is this possible? What is that fruit? How can it have such an amazing effect? Said Hierarch Skyfire quickly at this time. You only noticed it now? But it's too late. Yi Shiwen laughed loudly. His aura swallowed the mountains and rivers like a god. Chapter 34-23. Yi Shiwen laughed heartily. His aura was magnificent. At this time, he had already unleashed his aura and gained the upper hand. With the mysterious space, he could almost receive the power and law comprehension of the world tree fruit at the same time. He didn't need to spend time to comprehend it. Therefore, his strength improved very quickly. Every time they fought, Divine Lord Skyfire could feel the improvement of Yi Shiwen's strength. Similarly, Yi Shiwen could also clearly feel the improvement of his own strength. There was no doubt about it. This kind of battle was simply too carefree. Every time the surging chi and blood washed his physical body, it made his physical body more tyrannical, and his skills improved further. Such a transformation happened almost every minute and every second because every minute and every second was digesting the power of the world tree fruit, and then transforming it to enhance his own strength. If it was said that Divine Lord Skyfire had the upper hand in the beginning, then as time gradually passed, Yi Shiwen had gradually changed from being at a complete disadvantage to gradually becoming evenly matched. Every collision was a time to verify the Tao for him. It had been a long time since he had felt such a hearty battle. How could he not feel good? This Wu Zun is gradually gaining a balance. Everyone was not a fool. They quickly realized that Yi Shiwen was gradually gaining a balance. It was not like at the beginning, where he was almost suppressed. Everyone quickly realized that it should be the effect of the fruit. It was just that the fruit had such an effect, which surprised everyone. However, many people had thought for a long time, but in the end, they still couldn't figure out what the fruit was. Even many experienced and knowledgeable celestial venerables didn't know, let alone those sovereign emperors. They were only guessing and comparing it with the heavenly treasures they knew, but they still couldn't figure out what it was. However, gradually, they noticed that something was wrong. Yi Shiwen's strength was gradually increasing, but he didn't show any signs of weakness. The chi and blood in his body were endless and constantly increasing. This didn't feel like a forceful increase in strength in a short period of time. On the contrary, every point of strength increase was done steadily and surely. Although the speed was fast, this degree of stability was unmistakable. While they were in shock, the entire situation had completely changed. In the beginning, Divine Venerable Skyfire took the initiative to attack more. However, it gradually became Yi Shiwen's turn to take the initiative to attack. Moreover, the world tree fruit in his body was providing rich and majestic energy. Hence, he was more willing to attack. Every time he attacked, he felt that he had greatly improved. The more he fought, the smoother it became, and the stronger he became. Such a feeling was unmistakable. Damn it. Why is it like this? Hierarch Skyfire quickly felt this disparity and change. In the current balance of power, Yi Shiwen had firmly occupied the upper hand. He had completely suppressed Hierarch Skyfire's martial power. No matter how Hierarch Skyfire resisted, it was useless. He couldn't break free from Yi Shiwen's suppression. No matter what kind of move he used to attack, Yi Shiwen was very straightforward. It was just a simple move of the universe creation palm, and it directly smashed his attack into pieces. Although Yi Shiwen didn't burn the dragon vein in his body, the huge power of the universe creation palm was completely displayed in a situation where his martial power wasn't bad. It helped Yi Shiwen suppress Hierarch Skyfire. This made Hierarch Skyfire, who originally thought that he could kill Yi Shiwen, stunned. If this went on, it would be good enough if Yi Shiwen didn't kill him, let alone kill Yi Shiwen. However, from the looks of it, Yi Shiwen's performance was too strong. The growth of his martial power was almost as if there was no bottleneck. It was growing crazily. Originally, Yi Shiwen wasn't inferior to the ordinary peak of the third realm. However, his own martial power was several times that of the ordinary peak of the third realm, not to mention the advantage brought by the realm. Therefore, even after knowing that Yi Shiwen had also entered the third realm, he didn't panic. However, Yi Shiwen's martial power had increased crazily. In a short period of time, he was almost the same as him. Moreover, with the help of the universe creation palm, Hierarch Skyfire was gradually suppressing him. If this went on, he would really suffer a huge loss. However, it wasn't that easy to break free from Yi Shiwen's attack. Yi Shiwen was like a maggot in one's bones. Once he was entangled, it was difficult to get rid of him. Yi Shiwen wouldn't give him such a chance. As time passed, Hierarch Skyfire was anxious. As time passed, Yi Shiwen's strength gradually manifested. It didn't appear as Hierarch Skyfire had initially expected. After the effect period, Yi Shiwen would quickly weaken. Instead, he became more and more powerful. His chi and blood rushed through his body, making a thunderous sound. His aura swallowed the galaxy and was extremely terrifying. At this moment, even a blind person could see that Yi Shiwen definitely didn't take any medicine that could increase his strength in a short period of time. On the contrary, it could really increase his strength and foundation. Although Hierarch Skyfire didn't know where Yi Shiwen got it from, it was obviously not a problem anymore. Or rather, wasn't the most important problem anymore. Finally, Yi Shiwen's aura reached a peak. His movements were even faster than one could imagine. In an instant, he had already rushed in front of Hierarch Skyfire and directly tore apart all of his defenses. Bang! Yi Shiwen's palm fell and directly hit Hierarch Skyfire's chest. Puff! This time, after being hit, Hierarch Skyfire didn't just have his chi and blood raging. He spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. His blood essence splattered out like sharp arrows, piercing through the galaxy and destroying the stars. His entire body also flew backward like a meteor. He cut through the galaxy and flew for tens of thousands of miles in the sky before barely stopping. At this moment, Hierarch Skyfire finally managed to escape from Yi Shiwen's attack range. Blood flowed down from the corner of his mouth. He felt that his internal organs had been shaken by this palm strike. But what shocked him even more was the rapid growth of Yi Shiwen's strength. After his martial power had almost reached the same level as his own, not only did it not stop, but on the contrary, it directly surpassed him in one fell swoop. This palm strike was more terrifying than any of his previous palm strikes. And Yi Shiwen hadn't reached his limit yet. This was the most terrifying part. If this continued, it would be terrible. Yi Shiwen didn't take advantage of his victory to pursue. For him, the result was the same. If Hierarch Skyfire only wanted to delay for time to recover from his injuries, it would be meaningless. This was because while he was recovering from his injuries, Yi Shiwen's cultivation was also increasing at a shocking speed. The ordinary peak of the third realm was just the beginning. Hierarch Skyfire was several times stronger than the ordinary peak of the third realm. However, for Yi Shiwen, it wasn't the end. He was still improving. He felt that his limit wasn't here yet. At this moment, the foundation that he had laid previously had completely reflected his value. And if he didn't have a solid foundation previously, how could he have such amazing progress? As his strength increased, Yi Shiwen was more confident in his heart. This was because he knew that with such terrifying strength, any resistance from Hierarch Skyfire would be futile. Many veteran celestial venerables watched the battle between the two of them and gasped. Hierarch Skyfire had almost deduced the great Tao of the third realm. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to display such shocking combat power. He was several times stronger than an ordinary third realm. Even so, he had accumulated this over a long period of time. However, Yishuin had relied on his own strength to close this gap. Moreover, he had spent only a short period of time to surpass the ordinary peak of the third realm. He had also surpassed the heavenly fire divine lord. He had reached an unprecedented level. This was the peak realm that many veteran heavenly masters hadn't reached. They couldn't help but be amazed. Unless he enters the fourth realm, I'm afraid he really isn't a match for him. A veteran heavenly master couldn't help but sigh. In the third realm, he's almost invincible. This revered martial artist's growth is too fast. Another veteran celestial master sensed for a moment and immediately judged that even if they had the advantage of the martial power and realm perception that they had accumulated for many years, facing Yishuin, who was in his peak state like the god of creation, they were afraid that they wouldn't have much chance of winning. It would have been fine if it had been in the past. However, in the current fortune realm, a third realm heavenly venerate could already be considered invincible. Furthermore, he could dominate the third realm. It could be said that there weren't many heavenly venerates that could restrain him. Many people had seen such an amazing performance of Yishuin and felt an intense sense of crisis. They must find a way to break through as soon as possible. Otherwise, they would be surpassed by these juniors one by one if this continued. Nowadays, there were more and more young and terrifying juniors. It was inevitable that they had a feeling that the new generation was replacing the old, and the old generation was dying on the beach. Hierarch Sky Fire, your biggest mistake was that you didn't kill me at the beginning. However, you don't have such an opportunity now. Yishuin's expression became more and more indifferent. He could feel that his strength was still growing steadily. It had yet to reach the peak. The fruit of the world tree had not only enhanced his martial power and enhanced his comprehension of the realm, but it had also cleansed his corporeal body, allowing his corporeal body to advance a step further. It had also increased the upper limit of his strength. Otherwise, Yishuin would have been on par with Divine Fire Venerable, who had been accumulating strength for countless years. It would have been impossible for him to surpass him. Even if that was already very terrifying, it was still not enough in his opinion. If this is all you have, then today will be the day you die. Chapter 34:24. Yishuin could feel that he might have reached an unprecedented level in the third realm. His power continued to expand and increase. The energy of the World Tree fruit was simply too strong. It increased his power, raised his level, cleansed his body, and allowed him to contain even more power. He reached a level that no one had ever reached before or since. Therefore, he was not worried about Hierarch Sky Fire's counterattack. Any counterattack was nothing to him. As long as Hierarch Sky Fire did not enter the fourth realm, it was meaningless to him. Everything was under his control. He was not afraid of Hierarch Skyfire's retaliation. Even stalling for time was a trivial matter. This was because with the passage of time, he would become stronger. In fact, his rate of improvement would far exceed Hierarch Skyfire's recovery rate. As time passed, Hierarch Skyfire seemed to have a chance of winning. In fact, his chances of winning were shrinking little by little until they disappeared. Hierarch Skyfire was panting heavily. His eyes were red as he looked at Yishuin. It seemed that he couldn't understand. Back then, he had thought that Yishuin was just an ant. How had he grown to such an extent that he was injured? He was several times stronger than ordinary peak third realm celestial venerables. Defeating them wouldn't be difficult at all. However, he now discovered that Yishuin had also become so strong. Unlike him, who relied on his accumulated martial power and his comprehension of the higher celestial venerable's realm, Yishuin had purely charged forward and killed his way to this realm. At this time, even if he was stupid, he would understand that it must have something to do with the fruit that Yishuin had swallowed before. But what was that fruit? Even someone as knowledgeable as him had never seen it before. In fact, he had never even heard of it. He could feel that Yishuin's aura was gradually becoming more terrifying. It was becoming more and more powerful. It did not stop growing for a moment. It was as if there was no upper limit. This was the most terrifying thing, and this was also what he feared the most. As his strength continued to increase, Yishiwen's aura became stronger and stronger. It was even completely suppressing him. If this continued, he was afraid that he would not even have the chance to attack. He had traveled the world for so many years and had never encountered such a troublesome situation. It made him feel a little desperate. Yishiwen's smile carried a bit of indifference and also a bit of ridicule. It was particularly dazzling in his eyes. He only felt that his Taoist heart that had been calm for countless years was going up and down with a huge wave. All the blood in Hierarch Skyfire's body condensed to a single point. In an instant, he felt as though he was about to break through the shackles that had trapped him for countless years. Even if it was just for an instant, it would allow him to regain the power he had in the past and completely destroy this fellow before him. In the blink of an eye, his blood and chi condensed to the limit and evaporated. The terrifying energy brought about by his blood and chi finally broke through the suppression of the heavenly Daos and rushed into that long-lost realm. Even if it was just a small crack, it was enough. The terrifying energy that surged out from the crack caused him to be instantly immersed in it. However, just as this feeling was about to spread through his entire body, a beam of light flew over from the distant shore of the galaxy. It turned into a palm that soared into the sky and slapped down, directly hitting his body. Bang! A terrifying palm force rippled out. In an instant, it emitted hundreds of millions of rays of brilliance. The entire universe was filled with brilliance, turning into countless waterfalls that directly spread out. And in the center of this palm, Hierarch Skyfire directly spat out a mouthful of old blood. The momentum that was just rising was suddenly interrupted. The crack that was originally blasted open by the endless blood and chi was immediately sealed. Boom! On his body, countless rays of brilliance along with blood splattered out. His entire body flew out and directly crashed into a huge star, smashing the star into powder. When he was ascending, he finally revealed his biggest flaw. And Yishiwen seized such an opportunity and suddenly erupted, directly injuring Hierarch Skyfire. All kinds of strange phenomena manifested under this palm. Countless blazing rays of light collided together, forming a terrifying energy storm. The entire galaxy was trembling and trembling. Countless creatures were shivering under the pressure of the two, not daring to resist at all. Yishiwen seized the opportunity at the moment of forceful ascension. Many veteran heavenly venerates sucked in a breath of cold air. They used to be experts at the 4th level or above, but they had been swept down to the 3rd level because of the Sky Pass tribulation. Breaking through the Sky Pass lock in a short period of time was their greatest trump card. Although they had to pay a painful price and consume an endless amount of vitality every time they tried to break through, they could temporarily regain their former strength, which was enough to eliminate the enemy in front of them. But now, Yishiwen had seized the opportunity at the moment of ascension and seriously injured them. Did this mean that they would never be able to ascend in front of Yishiwen in the future? Otherwise, they would be courting death. No matter how powerful their greatest trump card was, it was all fake if it couldn't be used. Thinking of this, they only felt a burst of coldness on their backs. If this continued, they were afraid that they would have to avoid Yishiwen. Unless they succeeded in breaking through the bottleneck. Otherwise, the title of the strongest person under the 4th realm would belong to him. This is impossible. Hierarch Skyfire roared. His roar caused countless meteors around him to collapse. Just as he was about to climb to the peak of his life, he was interrupted. And the person who interrupted him was Yishiwen. Whoosh! Yishiwen suddenly appeared in front of him. He just looked at him coldly and said, "Do you think I will give you the opportunity to ascend?" Yishiwen's body released an oppressive pressure. It was boundlessly terrifying. He was like the center of the entire universe, and all the stars were revolving around him. He was the creator of the world. As he spoke, he gently slapped his palm down. The slender palm slapped down, silently revealing an extremely terrifying scene. Wherever it passed, space, time, and laws all collapsed. However, there was no sound at all. This was because even the sound laws had collapsed in an instant and could not be transmitted. Hierarch Skyfire roared and snarled. He wanted to struggle, but it was useless. This palm was too terrifying. It slapped down with unimaginable power. Bang! His bones were broken on the spot. Blood blossomed in the center of the world. His entire body was almost destroyed. His blood evaporated, and his spirit was shattered. He was burning fiercely. The entire Milky Way trembled violently. Yi Shiwen had used his killer move, and it carried an incomparably terrifying might. Originally, Yi Shiwen's strength was not as good as Hierarch Skyfire. Although he could barely withstand the power of the cosmic creation palm, even if he hit Hierarch Skyfire, it would be difficult to hurt him. At most, it would cause his blood to tremble. However, it was different now. Yi Shiwen had already surpassed the heavenly fire god. He had completely surpassed him. He had stepped into the domain that no one had ever reached before. He was extremely powerful in the third realm. Every move he made had great power. He could injure the heavenly fire god with just one palm strike. His strength is improving. It is improving very quickly. Somewhere in the heavenly palace of fortune, Eastern Venerate opened his heavenly eye and said as he watched the development of the situation. Yi Shiwen had given him too many surprises. Moreover, there were more and more. Originally, he thought that it was already amazing that he could contend with Hierarch Skyfire. Now, it seemed that he was almost invincible. In this era where most heavenly venerates were trapped in the third realm, the benefits of having such an invincible master in the third realm as a helper were naturally imaginable. And Yi Shiwen had such combat power. When he became a middle heavenly venerate in the future, it would undoubtedly be much easier to become an Eastern venerate. At that time, he would be able to obtain the support of the Eastern venerate and truly wield the power of the Fortune God dynasty. He would be able to do something that no one had been able to do since ancient times. It wasn't just the Eastern venerate. Many people were also watching this battle. They watched Yi Shiwen as if he was a god. He had easily injured Hierarch Skyfire. They adjusted their evaluation of Yi Shiwen one after another. Many people were even wondering if they had offended Yi Shiwen. They could only hold back on some of their original plans against Yi Shiwen. What a joke. Yi Shiwen was too terrifying among the third realm. Hierarch Skyfire, who was blasted away, directly drew a huge crack in the galaxy. However, Yi Shiwen's offensive did not stop. A rainbow bridge appeared under his feet. This rainbow bridge crossed the entire galaxy and rushed to the front of Hierarch Skyfire. Then, another universe creation palm slammed down. Boom! Hierarch Skyfire's entire body was drenched in blood. It was full of various cracks. His entire arm exploded in the air. Just now, he had used this arm to resist Yi Shiwen's universe creation palm. However, he was simply no match for Yi Shiwen. At this time, Yi Shiwen's skills had completely crushed Hierarch Skyfire's. He was not a match for Yi Shiwen even at his peak, let alone now. In the blink of an eye, he paid the price of one of his arms exploding in order to escape. He screamed and roared as he ran towards the Fortune God dynasty. At this point, he had no other thoughts in his mind other than the burning desire to survive. Thus, he ran towards the Fortune God dynasty. This was because only in the Fortune God dynasty could Yi Shiwen act with scruples. Only then could he escape back to the southern region to obtain the protection of Tianzuan Nan. This was also his only way to survive. However, how could Yi Shiwen let him escape? He stepped on a rainbow bridge and crossed. On the other side, he flipped his palm and turned it into an incomparably huge martial emperor seal. 3,000 martial Dao blessings were infused into it. It fell fiercely and directly slapped Hierarch Skyfire's body. Puff! Hierarch Skyfire's physical body exploded on the spot. Chapter 3425. Boom! Holy Lord Skyfire's body exploded on the spot. He was almost smashed into pieces. Which Heavenly Lord's body hadn't been forged after experiencing thousands of calamities and tribulations. It could be said that it was indestructible and untainted by karma. However, it had been smashed into pieces by Yi Shiwen. This was still a physical body at its peak. Because of the drop in realm, divine supremacy, Skyfire's physical body was actually very strong. It was far stronger than ordinary third realm experts. That was why he could be several times stronger than ordinary third realm experts. But now, in front of Yi Shiwen, everything was like plastic foam, instantly turning into nothingness. His primordial spirit turned into a beam of light and escaped. Everyone could even see the panic on his primordial spirit. Many supreme existences gasped. How much despair did a celestial venerate have to be to abandon his physical body? If he did not condense and escape, he would not be able to escape from Yi Shiwen's pursuit with his physical speed. But even so, it was useless. Yi Shiwen's speed was the fastest in the world. He spread the law of time and formed a domain of the law of time. All of a sudden, divine supremacy Skyfire's spirit slowed down. Then, Yi Shiwen grabbed it in his hand and was about to crush it to death. He wanted to completely end this enemy that had made Yi Shiwen tremble in fear since he was in the Emperor realm. Wait! Suddenly, there was a loud shout. Then, a figure streaked across the sky and appeared in front of Yi Shiwen. It was none other than Southern Tianzuan. Why, Southern Tianzuan, are you going to stop me? Yi Shiwen narrowed his eyes and looked at Southern Tianzuan. Although Southern Tianzuan was a high and mighty ruler in the Fortune God dynasty, Yi Shiwen was not afraid of him. Let alone in the eastern region, there was nothing to worry about even in the southern region. He had also reached the peak of the third realm. Although he had not broken through and reached the fourth realm, he was not a character that could be easily crushed. Wu Zun, he is very important to the southern region. Can you let him go? At this time, Southern Tianzuan spoke. He had a somewhat awkward expression on his face, but he had to come. Divine Supremacy Skyfire was his important help on the road to becoming a middle Tianzuan. He was indispensable, and if there was one less person on his side, and Easter Tianzuan had one more peerless master, it would undoubtedly break the balance between the two sides. At that time, Easter Tianzuan would have an even greater advantage. No, Lord Nan, I don't care how important he is to your southern region, but this is our personal grudge. I don't want the Fortune Divine Dynasty to get involved in this matter. No, Southern Tianzuan, I don't care how important he is in the southern region, but this is our personal grudge. I don't want the Fortune God Dynasty to get involved in this matter. Yi Shiwen waved his hand and grabbed Divine Lord Sky Fire's body into his inner world. As soon as Divine Lord Sky Fire's body entered Yi Shiwen's inner world, countless talisman puppets flew up and flew into Divine Lord Sky Fire's body. They sacrificed him and turned into endless brilliance. They sprinkled directly on the world tree. The world tree was irrigated by the brilliance of blood essence. Another fruit of the world tree was gradually taking shape. It already had a preliminary shape. Although Divine Supremacy Skyfire was only one person, he was at his peak. His vitality was much stronger than the previous Emperor Hun Yuan and others. In the past, Yi Shiwen would find a way to sell the Emperor Hun Yuan after killing him. However, he would not do so now. He wanted to stay and irrigate the world tree. These heavenly venerables absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth and were immortal. Who knew how much essence they had absorbed between heaven and earth? Now that they had returned to the world tree that nurtured countless worlds, it was a worthy death. Seeing Yi Shiwen's action, Southern Tianzuan's face darkened. Yi Shiwen did not intend to give him any face at all. Wu Zun, what kind of grudge do you have between you two that you have to fight to the death? Is it because he attacked you this time? If that's the case, I think he is willing to apologize. No matter the price, the southern region will definitely satisfy you. Southern Tianzuan said. He only cared about speaking. Whatever price he had to pay in the end was up to the Divine Fire sect, not him. Anyway, he was just being generous at the expense of others. Moreover, in the southern region, the Divine Fire sect was already too strong. They even dared to cross over and compete with the southern Tianzuan residents. Now that they had been seriously injured by Yi Shiwen, They had no choice but to rely on southern Tianzuan. This was also a huge benefit for him. Moreover, after this incident, the heavenly venerables of the southern region would only trust him even more, as he was willing to stand up for his subordinates. This would naturally be of great benefit to him. Whether it was for public or private reasons, he had to lend a helping hand. Wu Zun, it's time for us to lead the army to the era battlefield. Isn't an additional heavenly venerate an additional force? Southern Tianzuan looked at Yi Shiwen and said. First, he expressed that he would definitely compensate Yi Shiwen. Then, he used the era battlefield as an excuse to make Yi Shiwen hesitate. However, his thinking was still too simple. He didn't know the extent of the grievances between the two of them. Yi Shiwen didn't even think about it. He just said, originally, if Southern Tianzuan had spoken, I would have given you some face. However, you don't know what's going on between us. Do you think it's just because Southern Tianzuan attacked? I'm not angry that he attacked the human race this time, because he was seeking his own death. However, this bastard actually wanted me to be his slave before I achieved my Tao. When I achieved my Tao, he even took the opportunity to cause trouble, almost causing me to fail. Tell me, if it were you, would you let him go? As Yi Shiwen spoke, everyone finally understood that there was such a hidden grievance between Yi Shiwen and Divine Fire Sect. It was definitely not a grudge that was formed in a short period of time. In fact, it wasn't even because of Divine Fire Sect's sneak attack. It was something even further back. What Yi Shiwen had said was to make a celestial master a slave. That would definitely lead to an irreconcilable ending. A celestial master was a proud heaven's favored one. Even if there was a huge gap between their realms, they could still be regarded as a friend. Although some celestial masters had united and cooperated with each other, it would undoubtedly be a taboo to make the other party a slave. As for the latter matter, there was no room for negotiation. Achieving Tao was something that heavenly venerates had to experience. All heavenly venerates had encountered situations where they had a slim chance of survival. At this time, anyone who dared to jump out would be an irreconcilable enemy. Therefore, when a heavenly venerate reached the Tao, unless the enmity between them had reached a certain level and they were irreconcilable, or if they were forced into a corner and had no choice but to try their luck, normal people wouldn't make a move unless they were 100% confident. This was something that a heavenly venerate would remember for the rest of his life, waiting for endless revenge. Many people came to a realization. No wonder Yi Shiwen was absolutely unwilling to let Divine Skyfire go. No wonder Divine Skyfire would rather give up his close cultivation and come to kill Yi Shiwen. Both sides were very clear that no matter who won or lost, one side had to fall. At this time, anyone who came to persuade them to stop would be hated. There was no exception. It was nothing more than seeing who would make a move in the end. Naturally, Heavenly Venerate South also understood this truth. He had never thought that the grudge between Yi Shiwen and Divine Skyfire had actually reached this point. This was different from space-time Heavenly Venerate suspecting that Yi Shiwen had killed Emperor God Rui. To put it bluntly, it was a matter of an emperor. It was not worthwhile for two heavenly venerates to fall out with each other. However, the two matters that he mentioned now were enough to make the two heavenly venerates become irreconcilable enemies. Seeing that Heavenly Venerate South was silent and did not speak, Yi Shiwen could not help but say, Heavenly Venerate South, I know what you're thinking. It's not that I don't want to give you face. It's just that there's nothing much to talk about between me and him. If he doesn't die, then I will die. It's impossible for me to let the tiger return to the mountain. If Divine Skyfire was just an ordinary third realm, Yi Shiwen would not have such a huge reaction. After all, if Divine Skyfire was improving, wouldn't he be improving too? However, Divine Skyfire was only swept down to the third realm because of the Heavenly Pass tribulation. Moreover, he was about to break through the Heavenly Pass. If he let him go this time, Divine Skyfire, who would make a comeback next time, would definitely become a huge threat. Although Heavenly Venerate South had great influence to ask him to let the tiger return to the mountain, it wasn't to such an extent. Wu Zun, as long as you are willing to give up on killing him, I can agree to whatever compensation you want as long as I have the ability. Heavenly Venerate South thought for a while and said. He also understood that it was impossible to get Yishiwen to agree with him just by saying it out loud. However, Yishiwen shook his head without hesitation. What Heavenly Venerate South promised was tempting, but he would definitely not do something like letting the tiger return to the mountain. Heavenly Venerate South, there's no need to say anymore. I'm definitely going to kill him. I don't care how the Fortune God Dynasty deals with this matter in the end, but he's definitely going to die. Yishiwen immediately flipped his palm, and a raging flame suddenly burned on his palm. It was the Nanming mythical fire. Poor Divine Skyfire had played with fire all his life, but in the end his spirit was burned to death by Yishiwen's flames. Heavenly Venerate South's expression was extremely gloomy. Yishiwen did not give him any face, and he was completely enraged. Chapter 34:26. Yishiwen just looked at Heavenly Venerate South indifferently. He was not afraid. Although Heavenly Venerate South was indeed terrifying, he was not the same as before. The person he had to look up to in the past was now on an equal footing with him. After the era's battlefield began, not only would Eastern Heavenly Venerate plan to make great contributions and become a Middle Heavenly Venerate, but he would also plan to hone himself in the era's battlefield, improve his strength, and compete for the position of Eastern Heavenly Venerate in the future. At that time, the two of them would be on an equal footing. What was there to be afraid of? Moreover, it was fine to give him face for ordinary small matters. However, Divine Venerate Sky Fire was different. These old monsters were more determined than the other. Such a huge defeat could not shake their determination. Once the tiger returned to the mountain, they might take advantage of this huge setback and enter the fourth realm. At that time, it would be the real terrifying start. Once they entered the fourth realm, they would quickly regain their previous strength. This was the most unfavorable news for Yishiwen. Yishiwen had experienced countless battles in his life. Not all of them were smooth sailing. He had also encountered enemies that were so powerful that he could not even muster the slightest resistance. However, he had never been discouraged. Those people had now become bones by the roadside in his pursuit of the Great Way. Who would remember their names now? Yishiwen had always expected his enemies to be broad. He would never underestimate others easily. He would rather kill the wrong person than let the wrong person go. This was Yishiwen's most fundamental attitude. How could Southern Heavenly Venerate ask him to release Sky Fire? Moreover, he absolutely could not tolerate anything that hindered him from achieving the Great Way. If he tolerated it, who wouldn't dare to step on his head in the future? Southern Heavenly Venerate looked at Yishiwen coldly and gradually released his aura. At this time, no matter what he was thinking, he had to show his attitude. Yishiwen could not back down either. Both of them had reached a crossroads where they could not back down. No matter how much Southern Heavenly Venerate's aura increased, Yishiwen could contend with it. Southern Heavenly Venerate, come back. Let's discuss the matter of going to the era's battlefield. Just as the atmosphere between the two of them was about to freeze, a voice rang out. It was none other than the Eastern Heavenly Sovereign. Yishiwen just looked at Southern Lord Tianzuan. He knew that, in the end, Eastern Lord Tianzuan had stepped in and given Southern Lord Tianzuan a way out. He didn't force Southern Lord Tianzuan to fight Yishiwen in the end. In the end, Southern Tianzuan only let out a cold snort and left abruptly, because he knew that continuing to stand in confrontation would not end well. Could it be that they would really start fighting? Even if he was willing to take action, the Eastern Venerate would definitely not stand idly by. At that time, it would become an incomparably embarrassing matter for him. Now that the Eastern Venerate had given him a ladder, he would naturally step down. Well done, ha ha ha. Yishiwen was just about to leave when he heard the carefree laughter of Eastern Tianzuan. It was obviously a secret sound transmission. Although he had given Southern Tianzuan a way out at the critical moment, it didn't mean that their relationship was good. There was cooperation, and there was opposition. This was the normal state between them. As a member of the Eastern Venerate's camp, Yishiwen's prestige had greatly increased. For the Eastern Venerate to advance to the Middle Venerate, it was impossible to achieve it in one go. It was accumulated over and over again. Yi Shiwen was in a good mood after killing Divine Lord Sky Fire in one battle. He felt that the door to the Great Way had opened a little more. Without this heavy pressure, his state of mind had reached a higher level. He only felt that he wasn't too far away from the fourth level. It was very difficult for ordinary people to break through because their accumulations weren't strong enough. However, he was strong enough. Even a veteran Empyrean like Hierarch Skyfire could be several times stronger than him. In addition, he still had half a calamity breaking incense. It was only a matter of time before he broke through to the fourth realm. Of course, the most important thing was that with the Fortune God Dynasty's recasting of the Good Fortune Key, the original Heavenly Gate Tribulation was not so serious anymore. Although the effects caused over the years were still there, it was no longer impossible to break through like before. However, Yi Shiwen had never lost confidence. The heavens and realms had suppressed the emperors for thousands of years. Apart from Emperor Qin, who once tore through the shackles, he was the only one who had done it with his own ability. How many dangers had he not encountered in his life? A small problem like this was nothing to him. Yi Shiwen returned to Mount Buzhou. However, the frenzy he had set off had only just begun to brew and ferment. Originally, Yi Shiwen was already quite famous. He had just entered the Celestial Venerate realm for less than 10,000 years, and he had defeated Celestial Venerate Great Sun, who was in the limelight. However, in the eyes of many people, it was nothing. He was just a slightly stronger, newly ascended Celestial Venerate. The phenomenon of seniority among Celestial Venerates was very serious. The fundamental reason for this was that the longer one cultivated, the deeper one's skills were, and the stronger one's strength would be. This was inevitable. However, Yi Shiwen's appearance had broken this myth of seniority. He had only become a Celestial Venerate for less than 10,000 years, but he had defeated Celestial Venerate Sky Fire, a veteran Celestial Venerate who had been cultivating for countless years, and even killed him. No one's words were useful. Even Celestial Venerate South, who had great power in the court, could not be given face. Not only did he have character, but he also had strength. This kind of person was the most terrifying in the eyes of many people. This was because Celestial Venerates during this period were undoubtedly at their sharpest. They were in the expansion period, so whoever bumped into the muzzle of the gun might erupt into an indelible conflict. He was different from those veteran Celestial Venerates. After countless years of conflict, he had already stabilized his foundation. Every move he made was not filled with anger, and he was not so flashy. Many people even had some thoughts of following the light. Ordinary people were not enough to make them have such thoughts, but if it was other Celestial Venerates, then it was completely different. However, Yi Shiwen's appearance had made them feel a threatening sharpness. At this stage, he didn't understand the meaning of compromise. He didn't understand the meaning of retreat. He would fight and kill whenever he encountered a problem. Such a person made them feel a bone-deep chill. Because Yi Shiwen was new, he did not abide by the rules. However, he had the strength to not abide by the rules and not be punished. Unless it was an extremely powerful person like the North, South, East, and West Celestial Venerates, no one else was his opponent. As long as they did not break through, they would not be his opponent. Because of this, in their eyes, Yi Shiwen had become annoying, and the light on his body was dazzling. Yi Shiwen did not know that he had begun to become dazzling in the eyes of many people. People who were too strong had never been very popular. However, even if he knew, he would not care, because he was very clear about what he was pursuing. However, just because he didn't care didn't mean that others weren't happy either. Through this great battle, more and more people recognized his existence. It wasn't like before, when his fame and many legends were concentrated at the Empyrean level. In this battle, Yi Shiwen had risen from the ranks of the new Celestial Venerates to a position that was equal to the veteran Celestial Venerates. He was almost an outstanding person among the current Celestial Venerates. After this battle, many Emperor Lords of the Eastern region came to visit. There were people from various clans, and even the veteran emperor lords of Heavenly Dao and Silver Moon Clan came to visit. The scale was unprecedentedly grand, and it made it seem as if Yi Shiwen had just entered the celestial venerate realm. However, in fact, he had already entered the celestial venerate realm for tens of thousands of years. However, this was just the beginning. In the eyes of the real people, Yi Shiwen was now truly recognized by the veteran celestial venerates. Regardless of whether they were willing or not, Yi Shiwen had already risen to become a person that they had no choice but to take seriously. Originally, when Yi Shiwen had just become a celestial venerate, many people had come to congratulate him, but the Silver Moon Clan and Heavenly Dao had not made any moves. These two were the leaders of many large sects in the eastern region, while the other was the leader of the strong clans in the eastern region. The attitude of these two giants represented that the human race had not truly been recognized. Although the human race was already above the ordinary large clans, there was still a huge gap between them and the top 10 super sects and the top 10 strong clans. Previously, the heaven-devouring demon clan had always felt that they were the third strongest clan in the eastern region, just below the two giants, if the eastern heavenly venerate palace was not included. They had also felt that as long as the heaven-devouring demon emperor entered the celestial venerate realm, he would be on equal footing with them. In fact, this was a very ridiculous thought because they had never truly entered the world of celestial venerates. Even the heaven-devouring demon emperor had been killed by Yi Shiwen when he had just attained Dao. Therefore, they did not understand that there was a huge gap between celestial venerates. At this time, the strength of a clan was only a part of the composition of status. The real gap was still the gap between celestial venerates. Now, Yi Shiwen had finally made up for this last shortcoming and obtained recognition. The human race had also truly become the third largest civilian force that could decide the major events in the eastern region. As for the clan's background compared to the Heavenly Dao and the Silver Moon Clan, no one had mentioned it, because it was nothing compared to Yi Shiwen's dazzling performance. From today onwards, everyone would pay attention to the words of the human race. No one would dare to ignore the voice of the human race, because there was a martial venerate among them, and that was enough. One person bringing the entire clan. This had happened since ancient times, and now was happening again in the present era. While Yi Shiwen was still busy with these matters, he finally received news from the Eastern Heavenly Venerate. He gathered the army and was about to rush to the epic battlefield. Chapter 34:27. Yi Shiwen had killed Hierarch Sky Fire in less than a year, and the Fortune God Dynasty's army had already gathered to support the epic battlefield. They headed to the Fortune God's capital. This time, besides Yi Shiwen, Moon Empress Bian Xiaoya, the Human Emperor, and the Thunder Emperor were also leading the army. In addition, there were also 1,000,000 human race elites. This was not an ordinary army of the human race, but the elites among the elites. Any captain was at least a god king, and there were many quasi-emperors among them. There were more than 200 of them. Although it wasn't a lot of people, they had brought all the elites. The main force of this battle was the Fortune God Dynasty's army, and the others were merely assisting. If the Fortune God Dynasty used the others as cannon fodder, the sky would be turned upside down. However, Yi Shiwen had the idea of tempering the human race's elites, so he simply brought all of them. This was the foundation that had been developed for tens of thousands of years. Otherwise, if the human race brought such elites, it would be tantamount to giving up the defense of their lair. This time, apart from the human emperor and a few others, everyone else had been absorbed into his inner world by Yi Shiwen's great magic power. This had saved him from having to wait until he arrived at the other side to release a large amount of black clouds. When Yi Shiwen arrived, the other celestial venerables also arrived one after another. All the celestial venerables who were heading to the epic battlefield had gathered. They also stood according to their respective camps, a total of 5 groups. Everyone else did the same thing as Yi Shiwen. They also took the armies of their clans into their own inner worlds. They only brought a few emperors with them. For a time, There were hundreds of people present, and all of them were famous in the outside world. They could make the world tremble with a stomp of their feet. But here, there were the most ordinary people. The emperors didn't even have the qualification to speak and could only respond in silence. The other camps were fine, but the Southern Celestial Venerables camp was obviously hostile. In contrast, the Celestial Venerables who were close to the space-time Celestial Venerables also had unfriendly expressions. On the other hand, the Celestial Venerables under the Northern and Western Celestial Venerables looked indifferent. Obviously, because they were too far away from each other, it was difficult to become enemies even if they wanted to. Ha ha! Martial Highness, you're quite something. Even Southern Lord Tianzuan has lost his temper because of you. A crisp voice rang out from the West Heavenly Venerates camp. Who else could it be other than the West Heavenly Venerate? Among those present, she was the only one who dared to poke at Heavenly Venerable Nan's scars. Her strength was not inferior to Heavenly Venerable Nan's, and she was also a female Heavenly Venerable, so it was inevitable that she had the upper hand. Yishiwen's face revealed an unfathomable expression. He wasn't sure. Did the West Heavenly Venerable really think that he had some tricks up his sleeve? Or was he simply trying to incite an even greater conflict between him and Lord Southern's camp? Sure enough, as soon as he finished speaking, the Empyrean South's camp's Empyrean Venerates all looked over. Yishiwen could only think to himself, women who could enter the Empyrean realm were not simple. They were even more powerful than male Empyreans. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to stand out in this male-dominated world. Seeing that Yishiwen didn't reply, the West Heavenly Venerable wasn't annoyed. She just looked at Bian Xiaoya, who was behind Yishiwen. Her eyes suddenly lit up, and she said, "This should be your chief disciple, Moon Empress. I've heard of her. She's a rare genius. She is only cultivated for more than 10,000 years, but she has already entered the Emperor realm. She's really good." The West Heavenly Venerable's words immediately made everyone look at Bian Xiaoya. Yishiwen didn't help her block this time. As an Emperor realm, he should have such boldness. Bian Xiaoya also didn't move. Her expression was indifferent, and no one could tell whether she was nervous or not. It's my disciple's blessing to be appreciated by the West Heavenly Venerable. Hurry up and thank the West Heavenly Venerable, said Yishiwen lightly. Thank you, Your Honor. Bian Xiaoya stepped forward and saluted gracefully. Her expression didn't show much emotion. She wasn't stupid. How could she not see that the West Heavenly Venerable wouldn't say that out of pure praise? Because of her words, many Heavenly Venerables cast hostile gazes at her master. She could also feel it. She is indeed a very intelligent girl. If she wasn't your chief disciple, I would want to come over and train her well. The West Heavenly Venerable didn't care about the indifferent attitude of Yishiwen and the West Heavenly Venerable. Thank you for your kind intentions. My disciple is stubborn and mischievous. This time, I also want to bring her to see the world. Otherwise, she doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. She thinks that she is very powerful just because she has cultivated to the Emperor realm, said Yishiwen indifferently. He calmly returned the West Heavenly Venerable's words. Okay, it's time. Let's get ready to go. At this time, when the West Heavenly Venerable still wanted to say something, the East Heavenly Venerable appeared at the right time and said, At this time, everyone saw a giant warship slowly emerge from the void. This giant warship emitted a blazing light, almost as if the sun had reappeared. Since many people have not been to the epic battlefield this time, I will explain. The epic battlefield is in the depths of the chaos. It is at the outermost edge of the Fortune realm. Its location is even further than the chaos where you usually go to search for treasures. Just the transmission array alone can't send you there in one go. If you want to go there, you'll have to face the power of space. Even Heavenly Venerables will be seriously injured and torn apart. You can only use this good fortune warship that was specially refined by the Fortune Realm Lord. Explained the East Heavenly Venerable. This time, there were people like Yishiwen and the others who were going there for the first time. This kind of explanation was very necessary. Yishiwen remained calm. He had already guessed some things. If the epic battlefield was very close, then the experts of the ancient era would have already broken in and caused damage to the fortune realm. However, they didn't. This meant that the true name epic battlefield was so far that even the experts of the ancient era couldn't cross it directly. It should be known that crossing the chaos was like an ordinary person sailing a small wooden boat across the vast and boundless sea. They could be overturned by a wave at any time. The danger level in the chaos was much higher than that of the sea. Even emperors would be in great danger if they entered. Even heavenly venerables wouldn't dare to say that they could completely escape unscathed if they went too deep. Only the strongest heavenly venerables could move freely in the chaos. It would be impossible to cross such a place without the help of external forces. Bien Xiaoya and the others revealed a shocked expression. They didn't know the specific situation of the epic battlefield. However, for the fortune realm, no matter how far it was, they could easily reach it by switching to a few transmission arrays. It was very convenient. Now, they had a vague idea of how far the epic battlefield was. After a moment of hesitation, many people quickly calmed down. After all, the people present were either emperors or heavenly venerables. They were all extraordinary existences. There might not even be one in a billion living beings. They followed their respective heavenly venerables onto the Good Fortune battleship. This is my first time riding on this Good Fortune battleship. It is said that the power of this Good Fortune battleship is extremely terrifying. It can rampage through the endless chaos. A casual collision can destroy a world. It is also one of the trump cards of our fortune realm. The War Emperor said in amazement. This time, he didn't bring too many people with him. He only brought his disciple, the Butterfly Sovereign. The two came to a place on the deck of the battleship and sat cross-legged. The Butterfly Sovereign, the Moon Empress, and the others quickly followed. It's good that the Good Fortune battleship hasn't gone to the epic battlefield yet. I can share with you some of the things I've found about the epic battlefield recently, said the War Emperor. His voice could only be heard by Yi Shiwen and the others nearby. Please say it. Yi Shiwen's eyes lit up. This was what he lacked the most. Originally, he wanted to go to the epic battlefield and inquire about it. There were no records about the epic battlefield, even among the human race. The other sovereign emperors also sat upright and still with a solemn expression. Among the several ancient eras they're fighting with the fortune realm, the bigger ones are the Devil Dao era, the Evil Dao era, the Law Dao era, the Buddhist Dao era, the Dragon Clan era, and so on. They were all supreme existences that once swept through a world. Yi Shiwen's eyes widened. The names of these eras were clearly passed down in the fortune realm and even in other worlds. How could these be ancient eras? Fellow Taoist, you must be very surprised when you hear these names. Fellow Taoist, you must be very surprised when you hear these names. I was also very surprised when I found out. Later, I learned that the Fortune Divine Dynasty is not the only era, but the other eras that experienced the Great Calamity were not completely destroyed. There are many inheritances left in the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Not only the Fortune Divine Dynasty, but the eras before it also experienced the Great Calamity. Now, if the Fortune Divine Dynasty also experienced the Great Calamity, we will also leave behind a part of our era's inheritances. In that case, each era has its own unique civilization. Then, what is the unique civilization of our era? Is it martial arts? Yi Shiwen immediately asked. That's right. That's right. Fellow Taoist is indeed smart. Our epic is the so-called martial epic, and the unique great Tao of our epic is the martial Tao. Therefore, the later epochs, the more wonderful and numerous the great Tao will be. When the Fortune Creation Heavenly Monarch was still alive, he had speculated that the Heavenly Tao might be upgrading. Every great apocalypse is a process of upgrading, and it will only end when the 3,000 great Taos are gathered. Then, it will advance to an unknown level. At that time, the world might not experience another great apocalypse and can develop for a long time, said the War Emperor. The so-called 3,000 great Tao is not unique to our martial Tao era. Almost all eras have similar sayings, so it is widely spread. Chapter 34:28. 3,000 Great Taos, one Tao for each epoch. Doesn't that mean that this world will be destroyed 3,000 times? Yi Shiwen's expression changed slightly. This was a huge blow to the Moon Empress, Butterfly Empress, and the others. For them, one great apocalypse was already a horrifying death tribulation, not to mention 3,000 great apocalypses. This is also the fundamental reason why they fight with us so frequently. If they can't plunder enough resources and luck, they won't be able to survive the great apocalypses. After all, according to speculation, they might have to go through 3,000 great apocalypses before they can usher in the eternal era. The war sage said seriously. 3,000 times. Yi Shiwen's eyebrows twitched. He didn't know how many great apocalypses this world had gone through, but it wouldn't be solved with just one or two great apocalypses. At that time, it would be hard to avoid going down the same path. However, that would be in the distant future. Before the great apocalypse, his cultivation might have already been able to survive the great apocalypses. After all, it wasn't just one or two epochs that survived. There was no reason why the martial epoch couldn't survive. The urgent matter now was to repel the attacks of the other ancient epochs. If the defensive line was broken like this, there would be no future. Such cases had indeed happened before. Yes, 3,000 times. However, that's a matter in the distant future. We have to repel their attacks now. The war sage said. As soon as the war sovereign finished speaking, the Good Fortune battleship started to move. When the huge battleship started to move, it didn't make a single sound. Its body emitted countless blazing rays of light, and after accelerating, it charged into the teleportation array. Everyone's surroundings immediately changed, turning into a passage flickering with endless seven-colored lights. Countless laws of time and space manifested and intertwined with each other, forming this passage and space. Seeing the rarely seen laws of time and space manifesting, everyone on the battleship sat cross-legged and started to comprehend. This kind of opportunity wasn't something that they could come across at any time and place. The speed of the Good Fortune battleship was getting faster and faster. Very soon, everyone had no idea where they were. The Good Fortune battleship was still speeding up in the teleportation array. At some point in time, a defensive barrier had appeared on the periphery of the Good Fortune battleship. Otherwise, even a sovereign emperor would die in the face of this terrifying speed that could tear through time and space. Yi Shiwen looked at the laws of time and space that were quickly dispersing in front of him. He silently calculated its speed. When he really deduced it, his face couldn't help but change. The speed of this Good Fortune battleship was even faster than using the transmission array. At this speed, it was not an exaggeration to say that a collision alone could shatter a world into pieces. The battlefield of the epochs was so far away that everyone understood. Even when the Fortune battleship was flying at full speed, it actually flew for an entire day and night before finally stopping. When the Good Fortune battleship came to a stop, Yi Shiwen discovered that they were in a vast expanse of chaos. He could clearly sense that the omnipresent heavenly Tao in the Fortune divine dynasty was showing signs of weakening. For a heavenly venerate like Yi Shiwen, he could clearly sense that the restrictions of the heavenly Tao were weakening. Everyone should have sensed that the power of the heavenly Tao is weakening. We are now at the edge of the battlefield of the epochs. Everyone, stay alert. Because Moon City has been breached, a gap has appeared in the defensive line. Hence, we might be ambushed. Eastern Heavenly Venerate stood up and said. All the Heavenly Venerates and Emperors nodded solemnly. No matter how vast the Fortune Divine Dynasty's territory was, there was still a limit. When they reached the edge of the battlefield of the epochs, they could already sense that the heavenly Tao was weakening. In other words, the suppression of the heavenly Tao on the ancient era's experts was also weakening. After the reminder, Eastern Heavenly Venerate formed a hand seal, and the Good Fortune battleship started up again. It directly broke through the chaos and rampaged through it. This time, there was no seven-color passageway. It was just that in the endless chaos, everywhere was the same. There wasn't much change. After a while, a huge city appeared in front of everyone. This city was so huge that even a heavenly venerate couldn't see it all at once. It was comparable to a large world. No, it should be said that this was a large world that had been captured and placed here. Then it was built into a big city. Although all the heavenly venerates had seen many cities that were comparable to a continent, they were still shocked when they saw this huge city. Everyone, this is our destination this time, Sun City. This time, it was northern heavenly venerates' turn to speak. Yishuan looked around and saw that the city walls of Sun City towered into the clouds and pierced into the endless chaos. There were all kinds of arrays and boundaries engraved on them to resist the attacks of outsiders and the erosion of the chaos. These were extremely brilliant techniques that could only be arranged by experts above the heavenly venerate level. It was almost comparable to the divine capital of the Fortune divine dynasty. It wasn't something that ordinary powerful clans and great sects with heavenly venerates could do. Some of the arrays were extremely ancient. Tom had left deep marks on them, but they couldn't stop the operation of the arrays. On the city walls, there were many tall and strong soldiers. It was obvious that Sun City had entered a state of absolute combat readiness because Moon City had been breached. Each of these soldiers had extraordinary cultivation. They stood on the city walls and wouldn't move for 100 years. However, these spirit formations and defensive boundaries were not aimed at the Good Fortune battleship. The Good Fortune battleship easily sailed into Sun City. From afar, the entire Sun City was very prosperous. It wasn't much worse than the divine capital of the Fortune divine dynasty. It was built by the Fortune divine dynasty with great power. Every city was extraordinary. The Good Fortune battleship crossed Sun City at a very fast speed. In just a moment, it arrived at the plaza in the center of Sun City and finally landed. There were already people waiting here. They respectfully led everyone on the Good Fortune battleship to a huge hall. There were already many heavenly venerates gathered in the hall. They were obviously expert from the 10 cities of heaven: Earth, Mysterious, Yellow, Universe, Chaos, and Sun Moon. Chapter 34:29. Inside the main hall, there were already many heavenly venerables and emperors waiting for them. Those who could enter this hall to discuss the grand plan were basically the Fortune God dynasty's top experts. Quasi-emperors were not even qualified to step into this hall. In fact, there were some meetings that only heavenly venerables were qualified to participate in. There were also differences according to different specifications. After entering the main hall, the heavenly venerables sat on the rows of thrones in the middle, while the emperors sat on the periphery. Their seats were much lower than the heavenly venerables to reflect the supreme status of the heavenly venerables. There were also differences among the heavenly venerables. Ordinary heavenly venerables were seated on the two sides. There were 15 thrones at the top, but only 2 people sat on them. When the East, South, West, and West great heavenly venerables arrived, they sat on 4 of the thrones. Even space-time heavenly venerables weren't qualified to sit on these 15 thrones. He could only sit below them. Although he was ranked first below these 15 thrones, he still couldn't sit on the same level as these 15 thrones. Yishuan instantly understood. Among these 15 thrones, besides the East, South, West, and Central great heavenly venerables, there were also the city lords of the heaven: Earth, Mysterious, Yellow, Cosmos, Desolate, Sun, Moon, and Desolate Era. He had heard about the structure of the battlefield from War Elder on the ship. In the Fortune God dynasty, the East, South, West, and West great heavenly venerables were the leaders. On the battlefield, the city lords of these 10 divine cities were the leaders. Both sides belonged to the 2 major divisions of the Fortune God dynasty, so their status was considered equal. In terms of strength, they were also the top experts of the Fortune God dynasty. However, Yishuan didn't know which 2 city lords were originally sitting on the 15 thrones. But soon, Yishuan found out from the 2 city lords' self-introductions. One of them was tall, and his entire body was shining with golden light, as if he wanted to seize all the light in this world. He was the city lord of Sun City. Beside him was a middle-aged man with a medium build. His face was dignified without being angry, and he was in high spirits. As he looked around, he gave off an aura that could swallow the heavens and the earth. This person was none other than the Moon City's city lord, whose lair had been breached. Although the Moon City had been breached, not all of the Moon City's experts had been wiped out in one fell swoop. A considerable number of experts had managed to escape, especially the Moon City's city lord. He was one of the top experts in the entire Fortune Divine Dynasty. His status in the Fortune Divine Dynasty was comparable to the East, South, West, and West Heavenly Venerables. Naturally, he would not be killed so easily, but looking at him, there was no sign of the shadow of failure at all. Unparalleled heroes like him were more determined than the last. Even such a major event couldn't really affect him. Welcome to Sun City, Empyreans and emperors who had stayed behind to guard the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, due to the recent events, I believe all of you are already aware of it. Therefore, I won't waste your time on pleasantries. The Sun City's city lord stood up and said, as the host, he naturally had the authority to lead this meeting. Now, I will briefly introduce the current situation of the battlefield. The Sun City's city lord swept his eyes across the crowd and said, currently, the defense of the 10 god cities has been breached, so the entire defensive line is in a precarious situation. Because of this, the other city lords have not come because they have to stay in their respective divine cities. After the ancient era's forces breached the Moon City, they began to sweep through the satellite cities near the Moon City. Currently, they have breached many satellite cities and have slaughtered many of our Fortune Divine Dynasty's people. Currently, the armies of our 9 divine cities are gathering and planning to cooperate with the remaining forces of the Moon City to recapture the Moon City. Therefore, we can't attend to these satellite cities for the time being. Now that all of you are here, please dispatch your men to the satellite cities that have sent out the warning. Wiping out those ancient era's forces is also a form of support for our operation. The heavenly venerables of the Fortune Divine Dynasty were in an uproar after Re-City's words came out. According to the Sun City city lord, it was obvious that he did not intend for them to intervene. This made many heavenly venerables who had planned to go all out feel frustrated. In particular, the East, South, West, and Spacetime heavenly venerables were a little depressed. All of them wanted to perform outstandingly in the battle to recapture the Moon City and ascend to the position of the Lord of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. However, it was obvious that the people on the battlefield did not have the same wishes as them. Yishuan was a little puzzled at first. Did the city lords of the 10 divine cities not want to increase their forces to recapture the Moon City? That way, their chances of winning would undoubtedly be much higher. However, he immediately understood why. It was not that simple. The position of the middle heavenly venerables was very special. When the Fortune Heavenly Lord was still alive, he was the most important assistant of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. After the Fortune Heavenly Lord disappeared, the middle heavenly venerables became the nominal lord of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Although the binding power of the middle heavenly venerables could not be compared to the Fortune Heavenly Lord, it was still slightly stronger than the East, West, and city lords of the 10 divine cities. At that time, the position of the 10 divine cities' city lords would also be restricted to a certain extent. This was probably what they did not want to see. Although the Fortune Divine Dynasty could be said to be a group of dragons without a leader, the current situation where the leaders ruled over one side had already been deeply rooted. It had already become the best model that everyone had tacitly agreed on. Unless another powerful figure like the Fortune Heavenly Lord appeared out of nowhere, it was impossible to change the current situation. For Yishuan, this was also a hindrance. After all, if the Eastern Heavenly Venerate didn't ascend to the throne, how could he succeed? Once he succeeded, he would become one of the most respected people in the Fortune God Dynasty. Does anyone have any objections? The Sun City city lord looked at everyone and said. The heavenly venerables from the Fortune Divine Dynasty looked at each other, and then at the East, South, and West heavenly venerables, as well as space-time heavenly venerables. After all, they were the leaders of this operation, so it was up to them to see what kind of attitude they had. However, the few of them remained expressionless. After a long time, Eastern Celestial Venerates said, "I have no objections. Wiping out the experts of the ancient epic in the periphery is also to better support the battle to take back Moon City." Since the East Heavenly Venerables had spoken, none of the other Heavenly Venerables objected. Naturally, the other Heavenly Venerables would not say anything else. Naturally, they would go back and ask. However, Yishuan could more or less see from the Sun City Lord's words that the Fortune Divine Dynasty was not peaceful. Everyone wanted to ascend to the position, but similarly, no one wanted others to ascend to the position. All right, then I will distribute the areas that the Heavenly Venerables are in charge of to you. The Sun City Lord waved his hand, and suddenly, the Heavenly Venerables immediately received information on the battlefield and the cities that they were in charge of. Yishuan also used his divine sense to explore it, and soon saw clearly that the area he was responsible for this time was the 31st District, which had been specially divided. There were 3 satellite cities in this district, and according to the information, one of the satellite cities had already been breached, and the remaining 2 satellite cities had sent a distress signal. These satellite cities existed to protect the 10 divine cities. It could be said that they were the outermost existence. However, because of this, Yishuan had more doubts. According to the map given by the Sun City Lord, there were many satellite cities in the periphery of Moon City. How did the ancient era experts directly attack Moon City without uprooting these satellite cities? Moreover, they succeeded in breaching Moon City. Not to mention the densely packed satellite cities, just looking at the defensive power of Moon City, one could roughly come to a conclusion. Take the human clan as an example. Even if the entire race risked their lives to attack Moon City, it would be difficult to break through the surface of Moon City. Otherwise, the 10 divine cities would have been breached long ago. This was the first time since the establishment of the 10 divine cities. There must be some information that they did not know. It seemed that they needed to spend some time to collect information. If there are no other questions, then let's set off immediately. The military situation is urgent, and we cannot delay any longer. Sun City Lord said slowly. The Heavenly Venerables looked at each other and did not object. Although they were not familiar with this place, the chaos was not a dangerous place for them. Moreover, as the Sun City Lord said, the military situation was urgent. If the ancient era experts completely occupied Moon City, then it would be very difficult to recapture it. Even the army of the ancient era could use this gap as the center and march straight in. The consequences were naturally extremely terrifying. This was also a consequence that they did not want to face. They still had the ability to look at the overall situation. With their cultivation, they did not need to rest and recover at all. They could immediately enter the battle without any pressure. Just as everyone got up and prepared to leave, suddenly, there was a shout from the Emperor Lord's seat. Everyone turned their heads and saw a male and female Emperor Lord facing each other in midair. The female Emperor Lord was glaring at the male Emperor Lord. Yishuan's expression suddenly became sharp because he realized that the female Emperor Lord was not someone else, but Bian Xiaoye. At this time, Bian Xiaoye's face revealed a somewhat angry expression. Her embroidered eyebrows were upside down, and her eyes seemed to be shooting flames. And opposite her, there was a handsome male Emperor Lord looking at Bian Xiaoye with a somewhat lascivious expression. His eyes were fixed on Bian Xiaoye, as if he did not care about the gazes of others. "How dare you?" Yishuan shouted angrily and waved his sleeves. Suddenly, a huge force swept towards the male Emperor Lord with a thunderous momentum. Chapter 34:30. Yishuan's attack was as fast as lightning. In an instant, it tore through space and swept in front of the male Emperor Lord. With Yishuan's strength, the consequences could be imagined if he hit the target. However, Yishuan didn't care. A mere Emperor Lord was nothing to him. So what if he was slapped to death? He was a heavenly venerate now. He didn't have to worry about a mere emperor lord. Moreover, although he didn't see this person's actions, he could roughly guess it from his expression and Bien Xiaoya's annoyance. He was immediately furious. However, at this critical moment, a large hand reached out and slapped Yi Shiwen's attack. Yi Shiwen's attack instantly dissipated like a mass of air and disappeared without a trace. Yi Shiwen suddenly turned his head. His gaze was as sharp as a knife, as it pointed straight at the Moon City Lord sitting on the throne. The Moon City Lord's expression didn't change as he faced Yi Shiwen's gaze. He just looked at Yi Shiwen indifferently. "What do you want?" Yi Shiwen couldn't help but ask. "I would like to ask, what do you want? Why did you attack my son?" The Moon City Lord asked faintly, but his gaze was like a torch. He wasn't afraid of Yi Shiwen's gaze. "Why would I attack?" Your son dared to harass my disciple. That's a capital crime," Yi Shiwen said coldly. He just realized that this male Emperor Lord was actually the son of the Moon City Lord. He couldn't help but frown slightly. If the City Lord of Moon City had lowered his head, Yi Shiwen would have let it go. However, the City Lord had a high and mighty appearance, without a trace of guilt. This completely enraged Yi Shiwen. The City Lord of Moon City was very powerful, but he was not a soft persimmon that anyone could pinch. "What's your name?" The Moon City Lord looked at Yi Shiwen. His expression was still full of arrogance. He was always like this when it came to people like Yi Shiwen, who he couldn't even remember. However, in Yi Shiwen's opinion, this arrogant expression was even more abhorrent. He is a newly promoted heavenly venerate in the Eastern region, a martial venerate, and an elder of the human race. Eastern venerate stepped forward and said, faintly pointing out that Yi Shiwen was from the Eastern region. The Moon City Lord had to give him some face even if he didn't want to. Human race? Is it the race of the guy who committed a heinous crime and stole the creation key? The corner of the Moon City Lord's mouth twitched. He seemed to have thought of something. Then he looked at Yi Shiwen and said, "I didn't expect someone from that clan to be promoted to the Celestial Master level again. It's really incredible. If you were under my command, I would have killed your clan long ago to prevent future disasters." Yi Shiwen raised his eyebrows slightly, his expression sinister. The Moon City Lord was not only insolent, he even threatened to destroy the human race. This had already violated the second bottom line in Yi Shiwen's heart. Fellow Taoist must be joking. After all, the rise of Wu Zun has contributed a lot to our Fortune God dynasty, and has contributed greatly to our Fortune God dynasty. Eastern Venerate said with a faint smile, casually categorizing the Moon City Lord's words as a joke. As for the past, isn't it all in the past? Is it over? How many Taoists have suffered because of this? Because of him, our epic battlefield defensive area has been reduced again and again. If not for this, how could today's incident have happened? The Moon City Lord said loudly. Yi Shiwen stepped forward, his eyes like lightning as he stared at the Moon City Lord and said, "I can't afford to wear the hat of fellow Taoist. Whether it's the merits or demerits will naturally be judged by future generations. However, what I want to ask is, your son actually dared to disrespect my disciple. You should also give me an explanation." The other heavenly venerates stared at these two people, especially the three heavenly venerates from the north, south, and west. Space-time heavenly venerate, the Sun City Lord, and the others did not step forward to mediate. Although this was a time when everyone needed to be united, they also did not believe that these two people would start a war over two emperors. That was simply not worth it. Your disciple is also quite good-looking. Since my son likes him, then let our two families form an alliance. My son will marry your disciple as a concubine. How about that? Although the Moon City Lord's tone was asking a question, his tone was not negotiable. He finally displayed the imposing manner of an overlord. Even though Moon City had been captured and he was swaying like a stray dog, he was still one of the top experts of the Fortune God dynasty. In the Fortune God dynasty, whether it was in terms of strength or experience, he was at the forefront. He did not care about a new junior like Yi Shiwen at all. What a joke. How can a tiger girl be a match for a dog? Why don't you take a look at your son? He actually wants to marry my disciple as a concubine. Even if he is the main wife, he is not worthy. Yi Shiwen's face revealed a look of disdain and disgust. The Silver Moon City Lord's son had a lecherous look on his face. Although he was a level 7 Emperor Lord, his aura was unstable and his skills were mixed. It was obvious that his foundation was very poor. If he could rise to the Emperor Lord realm like this, who knew how many resources the Silver Moon City Lord had poured into nurturing this trash? People who relied on their elders to grow up were the type that Yi Shiwen despised the most. There were also some people who were born noble but had outstanding talent. That was nothing. However, the Silver Moon City Lord's son was obviously not like that. Hearing Yi Shiwen's words, the Silver Moon City Lord's face immediately fell. According to his temper, he would probably explode on the spot. Even if he was a heavenly venerable, he would not be an exception. After so many years of being high and mighty, he did not even care about ordinary heavenly venerables. If he was in a good mood, he would call them fellow Taoist. If he was in a bad mood, he would say all sorts of nasty things. Only the 4 great heavenly venerables of the north, south, east, and west, as well as the other God City Lords, could make him slightly raise his eyebrows. No one expected that Yi Shiwen's words would be so fierce. This was no longer a falling out. He was ruthlessly tearing off the Silver Moon City Lord's face and slapping him. Many of the era battlefield's heavenly venerables present knew about the Silver Moon City Lord's son. However, everyone knew that the Silver Moon City Lord doted on this child. In his early years, he wandered alone in the chaos. In the end, he was chased by an Emperor Lord of an ancient era. In the end, no one expected that the Silver Moon City Lord would disregard his dignity and personally attack him. He chased him into the depths of the chaos and finally killed him. After this incident, everyone already knew how much the Silver Moon City Lord doted on his son. No one was willing to poke at his scars on this issue. After all, Yi Shiwen was a newcomer. He obviously did not know this unspoken rule of the era battlefield. This was a ruthless slap in the face. Moreover, this slap in the face was too ruthless. Who was a dog? Wasn't he talking about the Silver Moon City Lord? On the side, the Silver Moon City Lord's son was also flushed with anger. He had never suffered such a great insult in his life. As the Silver Moon City Lord's son, his life had been smooth ever since he was a child. His cultivation was nurtured by the Silver Moon City Lord at all costs. Normally, he was even more unscrupulous in his actions. Whoever dared to offend him would be offending the Silver Moon City Lord. Especially within the Silver Moon City's territory, no one dared to provoke him. Now, it was no longer provoking him. He was simply looking down on him. He had actually called him a dog. This was the first time he had been compared to a dog. "You old dog, what nonsense are you talking about?" In a moment of shock and anger, he immediately scolded loudly. Yi Shiwen frowned slightly and snorted coldly. The Silver Moon City Lord's son looked as if he had been struck by lightning. He knelt down and became even more unbearable. The other Celestial Masters also cast a somewhat disgusted look. They did not have a good impression of him in the first place. Moreover, at this time, the Silver Moon City Lord's son actually dared to yell at a Celestial Master and scold a Celestial Master as an old dog. This had already violated the taboo of a Celestial Master. Even if he was not scolding them, it would still make them feel uncomfortable. No matter which camp they belonged to, they were in the same trench at this time. If this kind of person was not taught a lesson, wouldn't there be people who would casually yell at them in the future? He even dared to call them an old dog. These words sounded like they were scolding Yi Shiwen, but it was also very suitable to scold them. Perhaps he had also scolded them like this in his heart. With this guy's arrogance, perhaps he really dared to have such thoughts. It was just that having such thoughts was a great disrespect to a Celestial Master. If it was not because of the Silver Moon City Lord's face, someone would have already killed him. Previously, when Yi Shiwen killed the heaven-devouring demon monarch, many Celestial Masters had secretly targeted him. This was the same reason why the Silver Moon City Lord's son had caused everyone to be unhappy and share a common enemy. Almost instantly, without giving everyone time to think, they saw the Silver Moon City Lord directly grab Yi Shiwen in anger. You have no right to teach my son a lesson." When the Silver Moon City Lord attacked in anger, everyone immediately felt a huge pressure crushing down on them. The emperors felt even more terrifying and incomparable pressure, as if the world was about to be destroyed. In particular, Bien Xiaoya was directly affected. Her fair face was suddenly covered with dense, fine sweat. The Silver Moon City Lord had only released a little bit of his aura, but had already made an emperor like her feel that the world was about to be destroyed. She even had doubts about her own Tao. This was a situation that had never happened before. Yishuan took a slight step forward and blocked in front of Bien Xiaoya. Suddenly, Bien Xiaoya felt that the huge, tsunami-like pressure disappeared without a trace. Although this was extremely terrifying pressure for an emperor, for Yishuan, who was also a celestial master, even if his cultivation was not as good as the Silver Moon City Lord, a little bit of pressure would not be able to do anything to him. Just as Yishuan was about to make a move to resist the Silver Moon City Lord, the Eastern Celestial Master directly walked over from the side and casually dissolved the Silver Moon City Lord's big hand into nothingness. The Eastern Celestial Master said with a smile on his face, "There is no need for you to be angry about the matters of the younger generation. Moreover, your nephew really needs to be disciplined. You are disrespectful." Chapter 34-31. Eastern Heavenly Venerate's words made the other Heavenly Venerates nod in agreement. He dared to call a Heavenly Venerate an old dog. Not killing him was already giving the Moon City Lord face. Of course, Yishuan didn't care. The son of the Moon City Lord saw that he was a Heavenly Venerate and thought that he had cultivated for a long time. However, in reality, Yishuan's cultivation age might not even be a fraction of his. However, age wasn't the key in this world where strength was respected. Even though Yishuan was much younger than the son of the Silver Moon City Lord, he was still disrespectful in the eyes of the Celestial Masters. He didn't distinguish between seniority and seniority. The Moon City Lord knew that he had incurred public anger. If it weren't for the fact that his son was the culprit, he would have agreed and instinctively protected the Heavenly Venerate's position. However, now that it involved his son, how could he watch his son get beaten to death? I think this martial Venerate should restrain himself. My son isn't someone anyone can teach a lesson to. The Moon City Lord could only snort coldly. He wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand if he flared up now, let alone when Moon City was breached. As the Moon City Lord, he had already suffered a lot of criticism. Since ancient times, ever since Moon City was established, it had never been breached. This was an unprecedented crime. If not for the fact that the main task at hand was to recapture Moon City, the Heavenly Venerate's censure would have been overwhelming. Teach your son a lesson? I'm not that idle. He took advantage of my disciple. I'm just teaching him a lesson. Don't get carried away. Yishuan's expression was cold and indifferent. He still didn't give the Moon City Lord any face. The Moon City Lord knew that it was unwise to start a war now. He had no choice but to glare at Yishuan and leave with his son. After this commotion, the crowd dispersed according to their respective camps. However, before they left, they all glanced at Yishuan. There weren't many people who dared to go against the Crescent City Lord. Moreover, they didn't give in at all. The people of the Fortune God dynasty had some understanding of Yishuan. This was a fellow who dared to slaughter heavenly venerables when he was still an Emperor Realm Lord. Even if he was a little more reckless, it was normal. What was so strange about this? On the other hand, the Empyreans on the epic battlefield were a bit surprised. This newly ascended Empyrean was even more daring than they had imagined. On the epic battlefield, there weren't many people who dared to say such things to the City Lord of Moon City and not give in to each other. As for those imperial monarchs, they looked down on the situation. They didn't dare to get involved in the conflict between heavenly exalts. If they really got involved rashly, they would be courting death. Didn't they see the background of the Moon City's City Lord's son? Yishuan said he would teach him a lesson. Who were they? Yishuan, Eastern Empyrean, and the others finally relaxed a little when they arrived at the Eastern Empyrean residence's lodging in Sun City. At this time, Yishuan noticed that there was another Empyrean hidden in the demiplane beside Eastern Empyrean residents. It seemed like he didn't want others to see him. This should be the Mr. Huang that Empyrean Silver Moon mentioned before. I just don't know where he came from. Even Empyrean Silver Moon doesn't have a clue. Yishuan paid some attention. He would always be vigilant against people of unknown origins. Otherwise, he would have died long ago on the long road of cultivation. Ha, well done. Eastern Empyrean patted Yishuan's shoulder and said, "But do you know why so many people are supporting you this time?" Yishuan shook his head. He didn't know. This time the Moon City fell. Although we came late and haven't found out a lot of specific information, it doesn't mean that we don't know anything. In fact, the Moon City's fall this time is related to the Moon City Lord's son, said Eastern Empyrean. His son is called Yin-Yang Integration Emperor. He cultivates the Yin-Yang dual cultivation technique left behind by Empyrean. He relies on the intercourse of Yin and Yang to increase his power. Originally, he was trash, and it was impossible for him to cultivate to become a sovereign lord. However, he couldn't resist the Moon City Lord's coercion and temptation. He found a few sovereign lord wives for him. He relied on the essence of these female sovereign lords to cultivate for tens of thousands of years to enter the sovereign lord realm. He has cultivated for hundreds of millions of years, but he is still only a sovereign lord realm 7. Because this child is the only child left behind by the wife of the city lord of Moon City, who had passed away before he reached the Tao realm. Also, because his wife suffered the curse in his place and was seriously injured, she passed away after giving birth to this child. Because of this, the city lord of Moon City doted on him so much that everyone in the upper echelons knew about it. Eastern Celestial Venerate said slowly, "What does the destruction of the Moon City have to do with him?" Yishuan frowned slightly and asked, "Don't worry, listen to me slowly. Isn't it difficult for his son to improve his cultivation? Because he recruited female sovereign lords for him in the early years, it has already caused great indignation and resentment. Moreover, the few female sovereign lords before him have already lost their chastity, and they are not as effective as the Yin Qi of virgins. Therefore, he simply went to the depths of the chaos and captured a demoness from the devil era. He wanted her to be his son's cultivation furnace. Who would have thought that this demoness also cultivates the dual cultivation technique? She hit it very deeply. After she plucked his son, she almost sucked his son dry. Moreover, she took advantage of the fact that her cultivation had skyrocketed to break free from the restriction that he had set up. However, he was unaware of this. In the end, he acted as a spy in the city and destroyed the Moon City in one fell swoop. Said Eastern Empyrean, "That's not right. Even if a sovereign lord attacked from the inside, it wouldn't be that easy to destroy the Silver Moon City." Yishuan immediately frowned and asked, "The defenses of the Moon City could be seen from the Sun City. If a sovereign lord dared to launch a sneak attack, wouldn't that be courting death? Because he used other means. It was the means of the supreme demonic master. That demoness background isn't small either. This matter can be concealed from others, but it can't be concealed from us. Originally, he had committed such a huge mistake that led to such serious consequences. How could the Moon City Lord escape so easily? But guess what he said? Said Eastern Empyrean with a sneer on his face. He said that he and his son are both victims of this matter. If we continue to force him, he will go and seek refuge with the ancient era. As soon as Eastern Empyrean's voice fell, War Elder couldn't help but shout angrily, "What a traitor!" He had always been loyal and devoted to the Fortune God dynasty. He couldn't accept the existence of such a person. He actually had the idea of betraying the Fortune God dynasty. Moreover, this was a huge mistake that he had committed. Yet, he still dared to do such a thing. It was truly unforgivable. It's just that no one cares about him now. If he seeks refuge with the ancient era, he will be more terrifying than 10 Empyreans who have defected, said Eastern Empyrean coldly. He is a person of this era. The Fortune God dynasty will not suppress him. In addition, he holds a high position, so he knows a lot of our dynasty's secrets. It's not good to provoke him now. Let's wait until we take over the Moon City. Yishuan also knew the other reason why Eastern Empyrean didn't mention it. Although the Moon City Lord had committed a huge mistake, unless he personally opened the city gates, it would be difficult for a person with a high position like him to be put to death, even if he was punished. Moreover, this kind of battle power was considered to be at the top of the Fortune Divine Dynasty. Defecting to the enemy's side was indeed a big trouble, unless the Fortune Divine Dynasty had absolute confidence in eliminating him. But even if the Fortune Divine Dynasty had absolute confidence in eliminating him, losing such a powerful battle power would be a matter of time. The Moon City Lord understood this, so he was fearless. Even though he had just committed a huge mistake, he was still arrogant in front of Yishuan. It was precisely because he had confidence that he could be fearless. However, you have to be careful. Be careful that he will target you. He is not an easy person to deal with. You have to be especially careful during this period of time in the era battlefield, said Eastern Empyrean. And I understand. Yishuan nodded. In fact, he had never relaxed his vigilance. Although it seemed extremely lawless to deal with an Empyrean from the same camp at such a critical time, and it didn't seem like something that anyone would do, Yishuan would never underestimate his opponent. If it was him, he would not be lenient if it was necessary to eradicate future troubles. How could he dare to underestimate others? All right, all of you go and get ready. We will set off in a quarter of an hour. You all have the map, right? There's no need to gather this time. The military situation is urgent, said Eastern Empyrean. Yishuan nodded slightly. He then led Bien Xiaoya and the others towards the huge palace that was assigned to him. As soon as they entered the palace, Bien Xiaoya said, "Master, I have caused trouble for you." "Silly girl, this is not trouble at all. It is that Yin-Yang Emperor who is seeking his own death. If his father had not stopped him today, I would have killed him with one palm," Yishuan said indifferently. He understood what Bien Xiaoya meant. However, if he cultivated to become Empyrean just to be a coward, then what was the point of his cultivation, becoming an emperor and becoming Empyrean? His path of cultivation had always been to advance courageously and be invincible. All right, let's put that guy's matter aside for now. We'll set off immediately to rescue those two cities. This time, I won't bring you along. You'll have to walk in this primordial chaos. Although it's very difficult for you to walk in such a deep primordial chaos with your current strength, it's still a good training. Primordial chi isn't just dangerous, it can also temper your body. In the past, I used primordial chi to temper my body and created a supreme golden body, said Yishuan. However, he had not entered such deep chaos in the past, and his cultivation was far inferior to the current Bien Xiaoya and the others. If you really can't hold on, you can call a halt. Yishuan continued. The eyes of the three of them lit up. How could they give up such a good opportunity? Usually, they would have been destroyed in the chaos if they could come here. This was an excellent opportunity. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.